I'd like to call to order the village special meeting of December 19, 2013 to order at 5:03 p.m. Clerk Simsky, will please have the roll call.
Mayor Gunther.
Here.
The clerk's here. Trustee Addington. Trustee Barker.
Here.
Trustee Barry. Trustee Nero.
Here.
Trustee Scott.
Here.
Trustee Seneca. Here. Manager Searle.
Here.
Public Works Director and Assistant Manager May.
Here.
Police Chief Mulhern.
Here.
Fire Chief Wise.
Here.
Finance Director Parker.
Here.
Human Resource Director Casey. Senior Accountant Olson.
Here.
Public Works Street Department Supervisor Bath.
Here.
Public Works Water Department Ramsey.
Here.
Public Works Engineering Supervisor Noriega.
Here.
IT Stefani.
Here.
And Deputy Clerk Kamick.
Trustee Barry just
Came in.
arrived.
Okay.
He made it.
I'm ready for you.
He doesn't get an asterisk. Okay. If everybody please rise and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the first agenda item, budget overview. I'd like to introduce our village manager, Ron Searle. He is going to make some brief opening comments and then turning it over to our finance director, Spencer Parker. Ron.
And I promise it won't be a lot because we have a lot to cover this evening, and Spencer has a lot of information to provide to you, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. I just wanted to remind the board, and we've talked about this before, this is actually a new step for us to have the board get together at this point in the process and try to give us some guidance on some what we call significant considerations as we move forward and look hard at the numbers that the departments are submitting. So you're going to see a lot of information without numbers, and we're hoping to try not to get kind of caught up on that at this point in terms of just trying to give us general direction. Certainly that'll be part of the discussion as we move further in the process. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we would like to have an executive session at the conclusion of the meeting for personnel and for the purchase of real estate. So I want to mention that to the board. And at this point, I will turn it over to Spencer and his staff. They have been working very hard on a presentation.
Right, thank you. So going through the agenda, we're going to start off with the budget to actual comparison. For those of you that have your tablet, it's the document that's labeled 03_A_ budget overview. For those with the packet, let's see, it may not actually be in the packet, so I don't think it's in the paper packet for this specific item, so I'll just go over this on the board briefly. This is information that the same format you've seen presented previously. It's just a budget to actual comparison, and this is through November. I'll go through this briefly in the interest of time, but 7 months through the year, which is where November is, you'd expect to be at about 58% of your budget. As you can see in the general fund, we're at 59% of our revenues and 54% of our expenditures. And so that's exactly where we would hope to be. You can see we budgeted for us to have a surplus of $4,000. We're currently at a surplus of $1 million, but that's because we get property tax in all at the beginning, and then that's spent throughout the year. So that surplus will drop as the rest of the year goes on, but right now we're at a good position, we're at a good spot. The next thing I wanted to show, and this is something the board has seen previously in Friday reports, and this is, you can kind of see from on the screen, this is the look at our sales tax. You can see this green line that goes through is this current year's sales tax. We're doing very well, better than we've done previously, although this last month in September, the money we received in December was slightly lower than we had received last year. But overall, sales tax is doing well. This graph that's on the screen shows our projection for sales tax. The green line shows where we were at this point through the years. We're projecting to hit about $6.8 million in sales tax. We budgeted 6.6, so while it's still early to make the projection, at least at this point, we're thinking we can probably increase the budget next year by, maybe 100,000, maybe 150,000 in sales tax, which is good. Things are going well there. Some of you may have heard about a decrease in the estimated amount that the IML is estimating will be paid out from income tax. So last year they estimated we'd be getting about $95.40. They're expecting this coming year will be $94.70. However, because we're conservative in our budgeting, we had budgeted approximately $94 this past year anyway. So we're doing okay with that. We don't expect to see a decrease in our budgets due to this change. Okay, this next item is, for those on the tablets, it's still just following that document. For those with the paper, it's the second page right after the agenda. You can see our budget timeline. And there's parts of it that you'll be familiar with from prior years, but we started off with the budget kickoff meeting with staff, and we're currently at the point where we're doing an early budget workshop, or the board's column. And at the same time, departments are working on preparing their submissions for the budget. Finance is working on revenues and personnel. We'll go through a series of discussions with the departments, with finance and the manager, and then you'll see beginning early April, we'll be looking to have some additional budget workshops with the board with the anticipated approval date for the budget to be on April 17th. So if it turns out we need to postpone that a little bit, that's fine. We can do it the first meeting in May and have a little bit of additional time for budget workshops if needed. The typical process for this has been to have sort of engage the board just beginning with the budget workshops. And what we wanted to do this year was to try to get a little bit of board input earlier in the process. Because sometimes what happens is the board has questions about items that are presented at the budget or other ideas, and then there's not enough time to fully answer their questions before we actually approve the budget. And so what we wanted to do at this point was to try to get from the board kind of a list of their questions or other ideas the board has that we can be considering and using as we're preparing the budget for submission to the board. So that's kind of the point of tonight's meeting, is to try to kind of talk just at a very, very high level view of what we're looking at, what questions you may have, kind of present to you some of our initial thoughts on the budget, which will then be refined as we go through the process. One thing I did want to mention is, as the departments are preparing their submissions, we've told them to, for inflationary purposes, to assume an increase of 0.5% for all non-personnel items. So things that are likely to be in excess of that 0.5% increase are things that are going to be presented to you tonight for you to kind of, for your information, and also to get from you your initial thoughts and feedback on these items. So any questions so far on budget timeline or budget overview, revenues, overviews, any of the stuff that I've covered so far? Okay. So as Manager Searle mentioned, we do have quite a few items here, and basically our intent is to go through and try to get the questions answered. And so you'll be asking a lot of questions tonight, and what we will be doing is then we'll be typing down these questions so that we can give you these answers as we present this to you in April. So there'll be a lot of questions tonight that won't be answered tonight, and the point of tonight is to get all those questions as much as we can on the table so we can do the research to answer them. So when you ask a question and we say, we'll write it down, don't be surprised. That's sort of the intent of the meeting. And if we do have items that need some additional discussion, we'll of course be having more discussion in April. But then also, if there's anything that we think will need more discussion than we want to just handle at a budget workshop, if we can identify that tonight, then we can put it on an agenda to discuss at a committee level so we can cover some of that stuff before we get into the budget season. So I wanted to start off by going through our contractual obligations. So these are the things that are not extremely exciting. That's why they're gray. These are the things that are sort of the, so for those in the packet, it'll be the next page down, the ones that are listed in gray. These are the items that we have contractual obligations regarding, and so these are increases that we're going to have regardless of other things. Sorry.
Just for us who are a little challenged with some of the electronic
I-
documents,
Yeah, I apologize.
tell me which
Sure.
document I should be looking at.
Sorry, so if you go back to the
Just give me the
drive.
first part of the,
It's called 04_A.
yep.
So we're on 04A, the one that's 2015 considerations as contractual.
Okay.
I got both.
Okay. So
Thank you.
as you can see, the first item that's listed here is our audit cost. We went out for bid previously and we're on the last year of our negotiated contract. We're expecting a 2.7% increase this year. Not going to be a large dollar amount, but wanted to make the board aware of it. That's one of the increases that will be coming, that we don't really have a choice on. Same thing for the.
Spencer, is that a
Go ahead.
3-year? Is this?
Yes, it's a 3-year. What we did was we sent it out for 3 years with the possible extension of up to 2 more years. And then, so we're almost done with our 2nd year. Next year will be our 3rd year, and then we can go out for an RFP again or extend as
2.7
decided.
was built into the initial.
Yes, the
Great,
2.7
okay.
is built into the initial price and was the cheapest price that we had. The next item on the list is, so let me also, sorry, I'll back up real quick. Under each of these, we've added a few different questions to ask. I don't know that we need to go through all of them, I guess, with these contractual ones, but we can. So the first question that we're gonna want to be asking from the board is this something we should even consider? If this is something that you absolutely know right up front we're not interested in, let us know. We can stop talking about it, move on, and we won't bother getting any more information on it. If it's not, then if you do have any questions, we'd like to know what questions you have, what information you'd like, or any other related comments. So maybe I'll start with that with the audit. So are there other questions you will have as we go into the budget process in April regarding our 2.7% increase from the audit?
Spencer, would it be helpful just to let the new board members know
Sure.
a little history on our audit? We had the same auditor for how long, and then we went out, bid it out. It was quite a long period of time. We had Sickage.
Yeah, we had Sickage for about, I want to say at least 6 or 7 years probably. And then we bid it out, and now we're using a firm called Baker Tilly. We've used them for the past 2 years. We'll be moving on to the 3rd. So, any additional questions? Any other related comments?
So the audit that's performed in May after the end of this fiscal year will be the last audit under the current contract?
Yes. Yep, that's correct.
And then we can decide to either go back to bid or use the extension for 2 more.
Or we can do the
That's correct.
extension
Well,
that's
there's really
already
nothing now to
approved?
even-
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
There's an argument either way, to have a new set of eyes come in, look at your books. It also creates more work for staff when you go and change auditors, and, you have to kind of learn what they're looking for and vice versa. But
Yep.
we feel it's healthy to occasionally go out to bid and look at to have new sets of eyes come and look at the books.
Yep. Okay. So no other comments on audit? Okay. Moving on to the fire ambulance contract. This is something I know the board's discussed previously at committee meeting. The contract that we currently have with Kurtz provides for a 3% increase. So that's kind of the basics. Any questions that we'll want to address or answer at the budget time related to that?
No, I think we all
We
pretty
We just
much
did that a
agree
month
with-
ago, right?
Yeah.
We went through
Yeah,
all
it's
over
been
that.
gone through
Yeah.
very recently. Okay.
Yeah.
The next item on the list is for police and fire, the Downers Grove dispatch. Our portion of the cost of dispatch center is based on their budget, and this year, they're looking at, the initial numbers they gave us indicated 20% increase. We're currently looking into this, trying to see what the reason for that increase is, make sure there's not an error or anything like that. So we're looking into that, but that may be an increase that we will see.
What did it go up last year?
It actually went down slightly last year.
I can offer a little more insight, too. We met, the chiefs and I met with the manager in Downers Grove earlier this week, and that was one of the subjects that came up, was the increase. And one of the things that we know has been a challenge is there's been a bit of turnover with the dispatch center over there. Now you've got several of these dispatchers that started off, and they have a step plan, and they're starting to move up in that step plan. So we think that explains a piece of it.
Some.
And we actually think that that may be a good thing in terms of being able to retain some of the people and the knowledge and continue with the training base over there. But that is something that we did agree at that meeting we would look at closer, and we'd come back with some more specific numbers and
Is
information.
Downers going up in proportion too? 20% increase?
I believe that
Yes.
was the
So it's kind of,
discussion, right?
yeah, so it's cost of doing business.
Yep.
Spencer, what is the 20% figure? You got it?
What's the dollar?
Dollar amount?
I think that it was right around $12,000, is that right? No, more than that?
Like 57,000 for police and 20 for fire.
20, okay,
The
57.
the actual increase is that much?
Okay, think about like
Oh, we're
that.
paying, it's about 3/4 of a mil, what do we pay a year?
Originally, our dispatch center was what, about 800,000 a year? And
Something
we
like
saved
that.
about 20% when we.
Yeah,
Contractually, our split is just their operating costs and equipment, personnel costs for the village operations under VOC. We pay 40%, the Downers pay 60%.
But our total cost, 6, 7, 800, somewhere in there, a year?
Approximately, yes.
I mean, I'm
Right
just
now.
guessing, yeah, okay.
So it's a 20% increase of that.
Of that,
Yes.
yeah.
you notice how quick Dave said his is only 19 and, no. Tom's is 57.
Well, we split it, we split it more because there's more police calls than there are fire calls, so we split it internally that way. And also in our meeting, most of their costs, as Manager Searle just explained, are personnel related or wage related.
And the reasoning for the increase is just personnel or not?
We're looking into that. That's,
all right, that's
that
what
was
That's what
kind
we
of the,
think it is,
yeah.
but that
we-
was part of our discussion, and we have to have a follow-up discussion to figure that out. And again, part of our discussion too, and we talked about this when we had the meeting before, is we're looking at the long-term evolution of what's gonna happen with all the PSAPs. And certainly Downers Grove understands that we may be looking at further consolidation, because that's what the county is pushing us towards. And so we're gonna look at those things too as well. And there still is a need for a backup center in the south part of the county. That was part of our discussion the other day too. So we're looking for opportunities too, and we may be looking at partnering with other agencies.
Downers could be looking at it also.
Yes, oh, very much so.
Yeah.
That's a substantial increase. You know, it would have been nice to have a kind of a heads up that they saw this coming, but apparently they didn't. And it would be nice to kind of know what their plan is, if they can kind of project it out the next couple of years even. If it turns out to be personnel,
Yeah,
that they should be able to project
They
for
can
us then.
project it as long as people stay, right?
Right. Right.
That's pretty easy.
That'd be in worst case, but it's really good
Right.
if they're there.
And if I'm not mistaken, they just renegotiated the telecommunicators contract. So I don't know how long that contract will be, but now we'll have a closer set figure for that cost compared to the increase now.
I think one of the things we have to find out is why is there a turnover?
Well, we believe part of it is because the pay, when they come in, has been relatively low compared to the other agencies. So that's why we think it's a good thing that some of these people are moving up in steps now, and they will stay there.
Stay there,
We'll be able to
okay.
take advantage of
It'll-
that experience.
the
So we'll
retention.
benefit in terms of quality of service.
Good.
So the total cost estimated right now for this next year, 627,000 total,
The options,
With the increase?
with, including the increase. Yep.
the options that you have, you know, if you weren't using that dispatch center, you're using somebody else. It's only that one larger agency, right?
Well, many of the communities have gone to DUCOM.
Right.
That's
So-
the big mega agency in the county right now. There's been a couple of other consolidated, how many PSAPs are there left? 4? 5 in the county? We gave the number at the,
At the public say, or at, what was it?
You have,
I bet Jim knows.
yeah, Addison is doing a combined center. I know there's Ducom, Downers Grove, and I think there may have, and then on Deputy Conley can explain on the fire side, there's other centers for the fire side.
So you'd be able to find out very shortly, too, what an expected increase would be at DUCOM. You know, if their rates are going up, they're gonna reflect that for everybody else's budget as well.
It's hard because when we approached Ducom before, they give you an independent quote. It's not just a flat rate,
They-
because it's,
Yeah, they use a formula that we're not real thrilled about, and that's one of the reasons that we chose not to go with them. Plus, you're entering a very large agency where you lose governance control. We
Right.
felt by having a partnership, and, you know, again, the history was we tried to partner originally with Oak Brook. We thought a great partnership where we were gonna host it. That didn't happen. So we've tried to balance those needs, the cost savings, the service, and trying to have some governance control that we would lose if we joined DUCOM. But ultimately, as we've talked about, and our Assistant Chief Connolly here is a member of the ETSB, and if he wants to comment at all on the bigger philosophy in the county, but the philosophy is to try to limit the number of PSAPs, and that's being funded right now through the 911 wireless service charge, which has only been extended another year, right?
That's correct. The manager has it right that the goal has been to reduce the number of PSAPs. I believe DuPage County had about 22 PSAPs about 5 years ago. We're now down under 10. They're closing, consolidating. There's only one single fire agency PSAP left. That's Tri-State Fire over in Darien. And I believe there's 2 or 3 police single agency. Everything else is consolidated in some form or another. Probably not the place tonight to spend time, but there's a lot of movement going on, a lot of potential movement, and there's certainly a strong push from ETSB, which I personally support, to try to reduce the number of PSAPs even further. As to the wireless surcharge, it was sunsetted last year, was extended for a year. There's a 911 advisory committee working on drafting proposals for the legislators, and their target is April of this year to have those proposals in front of the state legislature. All the proposals going into last year before they just extended the year were very positive. They actually showed wireless increases. So we're hopeful that that would be the case, but there are certainly no guarantees in state of Illinois politics. I don't need to tell you that. So that's a bit of an unknown. The other thing that's happened relates to funding is that many fire departments and fire districts maintained wireless fire alarm systems like we do, and the fire districts have basically lost a precedent-setting case, and they're no longer able to retain those revenues, or they've backed away from retaining those revenues. And to an agency like DUCOM, that could be $1 million to DUCOM in lost revenues potentially. So a lot of things are changing. We will meet with the manager early next week and brief him on some recent developments. And I think there's other options out there for us to consider cooperatively, even with Downers Grove. But I don't want to, prejudge the conclusion. Just say that we're working on it, and we think there's probably, some future options that could develop for us. But if not, we have ways to maintain what we have right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we can certainly address the question about, make sure that people that are using DUCOM's rates, seeing if they're increasing similarly, we can get that information for you. Absolutely. Any other information or questions that you're with it? Yes.
Spencer, just so you can, take, again, this is probably was answered one time before, but just when we were doing it on our own, what was the cost?
We can certainly pull that up. I don't have the numbers at my fingertips. I know that,
It was about between $700,000 and $800,000.
So we're still saving a substantial amount of money,
It was about
even with the
20%,
20% increase.
There was a 20% savings over that cost
Yeah.
when we formed the partnership. I get the numbers?
I don't, and I know we had the last
But
public
that's
safety
what I
committee, but
needed. I thought,
Yeah.
yeah.
originally, we saved $300,000 by migrating to Downers Grove in our first year.
thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Union contracts will be contractual obligations that we'll have to pay. We're in the middle of negotiating a couple of different contracts, so those will cause increases that, will be contractual obligations. Any questions on that? I guess more of any questions that, we can put together and prepare for you for April? And any specific information you want now? Okay.
Isn't that sort of a hard one, though, to forecast if it's not,
Yes.
if we're not in the contract? So we have,
Yes.
it's really gonna be a guesstimate.
Well, we're ending
Yes, and-
we're ending the FOP contract, and we're just starting negotiations with the 150. So we're not even really in the middle of that yet.
No, so
Right.
we're kind of going into a new budget year, not knowing what to expect with those two contracts.
And why do we note that as an automatic increase?
we're sort of making the board aware of it, that it will be, it's out there potentially as a potential increase that will be negotiated, and it's possible that there wouldn't be any increases. And that's certainly, you know, our hope, but we kind of wanted to make the board aware of it. That's one of the contracts those are some of the contracts that we have out there that will be potentially.
Because it doesn't seem like we have a good negotiator if we already know it's gonna be an increase. I mean, you know,
Well, the fact
wouldn't there
of
be
the-
the potential
Right.
there that there
Well,
could be a decrease also?
There's a potential, but the fact of the matter is, by and far, the issues always tend to get boiled down to economics in most labor contracts. So that's what we're commenting on. Certainly, we'll have very good discussions with them, and we'll present the information that we think's relevant. We'll see where things go, but that's just, you know, the reality of public sector labor negotiations in Illinois. That's what a lot of.
So any type of percentage estimate on that right now, Spencer?
Not at this point. I mean, I think it's certainly too early. I would, hopefully, you know, 0 sounds great. I agree with you. That
Not
would be great.
realistic.
But, yeah, so don't know specifics now, just kind of want to make the board aware of it, that those are contractual issues that are out there.
Okay.
We will look at other 150 contracts that have been recently negotiated. Later on, we're going to talk a little bit about wanting to do a village-wide salary survey. Kind of see, I think you and I spoke about that as well. Try to get us some baseline data too as we go into that.
Okay.
But, yeah, we'll do our due diligence.
And normally this is a 3-year contract when you negotiate, or is it?
It can be a 3, 5, you know, it depends on what the parties agree to and what are the important issues.
But it won't be less than 3 usually?
You know, we used to do, and Jim will remember this, we used to do 2-year contracts with the FOP with a wage opener and benefit opener in our second year. A lot of times, depending on the economy, they'll want longer-term contracts with automatic increases. We obviously, as the economy improves, maybe want shorter contracts to see, you know, if there's going to be adjustments. So, you know, it's a give-and-take process, and, you know, 3 is probably a typical length of time that you see. But it could be longer.
Okay. Health insurance. So the next item that's listed on here is health insurance, and we will typically see increases in the health insurance. And so one thing that was discussed previously is, you know, that we need to look at some different options. We'll be covering that as we go through the other sections. We just wanted to make the board aware that we will have, we'll almost certainly have some sort of health care cost increases we have every year. We've got preliminary numbers from our vendor that's estimating our PPOs will probably be close to 0%, so to be conservative, I'm assuming 1%. And then our HMOs are expected to be right around 5% increase. So these are very preliminary numbers, but we just wanted to kind of make the board aware of that as the increases. Any questions that we can address for you, kind of?
How is the
Fair.
Affordable Care Act going to affect the insurance issue?
Yes.
Go ahead, what?
Yes.
Yes?
That's how it's going to affect us, yes.
It's a big yes.
Yeah. We are, there's a Cadillac plan tax, and we were just talking about this yesterday, and I was asking, out of all the IPBC communities, which were part of a self-insurance pool, how many communities are going to be affected by the Cadillac tax? Now, Kathy probably has better data than what we were talking about yesterday, because she's heavily involved with IPBC, but our plans would be affected by the Cadillac tax, and it sounds like most of the communities in IPBC will.
Right, our PPO plan already exceeds the Cadillac tax threshold. So we are going to be taking a look at how we can change the plan design so that it will fall beneath that. And also, there is a reinsurance tax, and that already goes into effect. So the pool has put into the premium where we've already been collecting so that we can pay that effective January 2014. And then there's a couple other taxes, which I don't remember right off the top of my head, and we can provide that
So,
information.
are we exempt from making a decision then by December 23rd then?
Are we what?
We don't have to have those decisions by December 23rd?
No.
No, okay.
No, but these taxes, we don't have any choice. I mean, we have to, the Cadillac tax, there's some things that we can do to mitigate that, but some of these other taxes, anybody who provides insurance has to pay these taxes.
And we have an employee insurance committee that's looking at some options. I understand they're waiting for some data back from Gallagher Bassett to look at maybe making some plan designs to try to reduce that Cadillac tax impact. So we have an employee group that cuts across the departments is actually working on that project for us right now.
How many employees do we have that work over the 1,560 that we do not provide insurance for?
We actually provide insurance for all of the employees that work over that specified amount. And so we don't actually have to pay for it at the full-time rate, but because we offer insurance to part-time employees, although they pay for the vast majority of it themselves, I think we pay 15% or something, but because we offer it to them, we don't have the fees that will be associated with it if we were to not offer insurance to those people.
Right.
So I think that's probably the decision you were talking about.
So, but there's a chance for a substantial gain there, increase for us, insurance-wise. Sure. With the tax, if you're gonna factor the tax in, correct?
Yeah, there is some increase, and that's kind of what they're factoring in the tax to get the 5% increase. We may have some additional if some of our employees, go to the exchange and get it from there, but we don't expect that to be likely, and if they do, we don't expect them to be very large fees. So.
Yeah, I haven't gone on the exchange to see what the different plans are, but I would gather, based on what I've heard, the plans that are being offered and what they're charging for those plans, I think that what our plans are and what the cost is, are very competitive. So I don't see our employees jumping ship to go to any of the plans that are out there.
With the exception of maybe the part-timers, where they would
Maybe.
qualify income-wise, correct?
Right, potentially.
Okay, thank you, Kathy.
Kathy, even though the HMO going up 5% over the PPO, how does it, is HMO, has it caught the PPO monthly rate, or is PPO still a little bit more expensive than the HMO?
I was going to address that. The PPO is still a little bit more expensive, but over the last, I'd say about 5 to 6 years, the gap is closing.
Okay, thank you.
And our mix right now between employees that have one over the other is approximately
Close
It's
to
about 50-50.
half and half, yeah.
50/50.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. There's no more questions on that. Move on to the document that's labeled 04_B, 2015 considerations operating. It should be the next page in your packet, and it's the one that is in the red. So these are the different considerations, and there's quite a few of them that are listed, so I'll try to go through them relatively quickly. They are color-coded, so the red items are expense increases, the blue ones are expense decreases, and the green ones are dealing with revenues. So the first item that's on the list is to consider replacing some aging equipment in the street division. We're looking at a backhoe from 1996, an end loader from 97, and a brush chipper from 2001. And some of the questions that, we've identified just as initial questions that we're going to want to look into in more detail to be able to provide you information in April would include, more detailed description of how the equipment's used, if, our need for the chipper, even though Waste Management's doing brush pickup and we will still need it, and we'll want to be able to document that, to explain that to you, and kind of some information on the wear and tear on the equipment currently. Is there anything else that you'd like us to present to you or provide when we do present this in more detail in April?
Just a dollar amount.
Right. We will definitely get dollar amounts at that time. At this point, we have, we can know dollar amounts for some things, but to try to be consistent, compare apples to apples, we decided, since we don't have good hard numbers for things, we're just kind of presenting those general ideas. But yes, we will absolutely get the dollar amount. that'd be a good thing to know before the budget, absolutely.
And then on the equipment,
Yeah.
instead of just years, wouldn't they give us like an hour
Okay.
count too?
Hour count, yep. Okay, great. Okay, any other questions or anything else you're gonna be looking for when we present this in April? Any other things to consider as we're looking at this? Any other related comments on that one, or should we move on? Okay. Second one is to replace and upgrade the exhaust system for our fleet in the Bay Area. So this is basically just to help get the diesel exhaust out a little bit better from the Bay Area. Any questions or any information you'd be interested in other than cost? When we present this in April?
Is there a certain OSHA requirement that we have to have there as far as air quality
Okay.
for that?
Okay, can definitely get that information.
Is there?
How about the age of the current system?
Bob's shaking his head yes back there.
There's
Okay. Great. Okay. Anything else we can prepare for you? Okay. Another request is something that's come up before the board for the last couple of years in the budget, and it's kind of been postponed, so we haven't had the money to invest in it initially. But this is an AC recycler, which would allow our fleet to take care of some of the stuff that we currently have to outsource. So the first question we identified, is how much do we spend on this annually when we take it out for repairs, and kind of compare that to the total cost. Is there any other information you'd be interested in that would help you make a decision in April? Okay. For the trees, this is something the board's talked about at committee level several times in the Public Works Committee, has been addressed previously. As you're well aware, with the emerald ash borer infestation, we've had to remove a lot of trees. We're expecting to remove even more. And so this is just to sort of make the board aware and kind of talk about the issues related to removing trees and then also replacing trees that are removed. And so, some of the stuff that, initially we decided, we definitely want to be looking into is, give you a good count on how many we took down in 13-14, how many we're expecting to take down 14-15, kind of take a look at the participation in our cost-sharing program where residents are able to pay for the cost of the tree, but will install it for replacement. Are there any other kinds of questions that would be good to address with that?
On the committee, in committee and discussions with that, we talked about possibly having 2 of our own crews. We currently lost one of those guys, right, to somebody else.
I'm sorry, to the
We lost one of the tree guys
Yes.
To somebody else. Has he been replaced or going to be replaced, or?
Okay. So, yeah, he has not currently, but go ahead. It's fine.
He was a certified arborist, but it wasn't a requirement of his position. So whereas the personnel was replaced, it wasn't with a forester.
Yeah.
So
When we talked about being able to have 2 crews, now we can only have 1 crew. And the numbers I think you presented it was to our advantage to do as many trees as we possibly could
certainly.
over the next few years. And I think the comment that I made is possibly have, a seasonal type thing where we expand that to even
And
3 crews or.
all good points, and that's actually part of this evaluation, is looking at the whole thing, the difference between planting in-house, other crews, with the higher quantity, outsourcing it, maybe instead of just buying the trees and planting them, buying them at a planted cost. That is what we will be investigating.
So for the budget, when you budget that, you'll have outsourcing it as a budgeted.
Yes. Yep. We'll have outsourcing it. We'll have information comparing it outsourcing versus doing it in staff. We can prepare information on, adopting a seasonal program, as you mentioned, absolutely.
Because
Well, but the removal was a considerable savings.
Yes.
It was, and like with the chipper comment, we were, doing a lot of that now in the season, so it's something we concentrate on in the winter. And then the
As
removal gets so
understaffed,
aggressive.
as understaffed as the street department is, I go back to, as we talked about in the fall, I'm so in favor of hiring it all out. You know, the removal, the replanting, and not burden the guys with it and get them so far behind. I mean, that's the constant complaint is they don't have enough people. They don't have enough to do it. So it becomes just a no-brainer to me, at least, to hire it out and get it done.
And you will get those values.
Okay.
And maybe we can have some additional discussion on that at a Public Works Committee. I know we've had some, we can kind of keep up to date with what's going on at the committee level. Okay. Okay. If there's nothing else on that one, move on to number 5, stormwater staff. This is something that the board's well aware of, the presentation done by the Stormwater Committee with the idea of implementing a utility. And so we wanted to address this here. There's several different places that staff would, you know, be impacting and be interacting with different departments. And so we kind of wanted to initially present this to you and just kind of make sure it's on the radar for the upcoming budget. We'd be looking at some additional staff, probably a stormwater administrator, perhaps a GIS technician, a couple of maintenance workers. Some may be in public works, some may be in community development. One of the main things is you can see what question we've already got on there, what's the recommendation from the feasibility study? As you're aware, we're in the process of getting a feasibility study done to try to help determine what sort of staffing levels would need to be done, what sort of things we need to be considering in this utility. And so those are questions that we'll, you know, definitely want to make sure we can answer as we go forward with this, you know, after the feasibility study. Are there any other, and obviously the first question is, can we legally implement a utility? Are there other questions you have that we can, you know, research and give information to in April, or any other specific items or comments on this currently?
Did Downers handle it the same way? You know?
Great question. I think they, did Downers do a feasibility study? I believe
Yes.
did, yes.
They did.
They did, and their process actually started with a stormwater management plan. I mean, over many years, probably 10 in total, you know, to get through the whole process. So they really took it in steps over a long time.
Maybe something we could look at theirs to get an idea. So we don't have to
Certainly their
reinvent
plan,
the
and
wheel.
actually what went out was the request for qualifications, and that was our request that we published was a combination of samples from Downers Grove, Woodridge, DuPage County, and others, and then we use that as the model to get it. So we haven't selected a consultant or started the feasibility study. We're just waiting for those submittals.
Okay. Any other stormwater questions or comments at this point? Okay. And that's something else that, you know, of course, as we get more information on it, it will definitely be kept up to date. That's not something we're just going to wait until budget to spring on you. The next item listed here is blue because it's an expense decrease, and this would be to eliminate our Bobcat trade-in program. We currently have a program where we get a Bobcat each year and we trade it in to get a new Bobcat each year for, you know, some additional cost. We think that we could save some money if we were to do the yearly maintenance, just, you know, do our own minimal yearly maintenance, just keep the Bobcat that we have instead of trading it in. So it'd be an opportunity to save a little bit of money. And we've, you know, now feel that we have the in-house maintenance capabilities to do that. One question that we do want to address before we make the decision, of course, is if we do stop with this specific Bobcat, do we still have the option to do it with others if we decide we want to go back to the program?
How many Bobcats do we currently have? Two? Two for the whole village?
And one in water.
Any other questions on that? Okay. The next item I wanted to mention, and this was kind of for, I guess this is more of just sort of an informational piece for the board, as well as, you know, of course, if there's any questions, we can address them. But as you're aware, one of the aspects of Waste Management's contract was to add the brush pickup service to that contract. And so we will, of course, be looking to see if there's going to be any cost savings that are generated from that. But in discussions with the Public Works Department, it's kind of been determined that that really is a good substitute for the level of the program we used to do. But at the level we're currently doing it with the 2 pickups a year, whether we continue those 2 pickups to be able to do some of the bigger items for our residents, or even if we eliminate those, because it's only a small portion of the time now, there's not necessarily the ability to reduce staff or to reduce equipment significantly to be able to have large savings from Waste Management picking this up. It's more of a benefit to our residents as opposed to a cost-saving measure for the village at this point. So I just wanted to kind of get that out for your information. I don't know if there's any other questions on that, but wanted to just mention that. Okay. This next one, as well as several others that you'll see coming up through here, are items that we've listed as expense decreases that were things that were considered at last year's budget. So these were items that have been presented previously as possible things that could be decreased. At this point, in time, I don't think we're at a position where we necessarily are trying to identify what cuts we want to make. I think we need to see some numbers first and know the different values of the increases we're looking for. We may come to a point in the budget process where, in order to have some of these increases that we're looking for, we may need to make cuts somewhere else. And so I wanted to kind of remind the board, or just kind of refresh the board's memory as to some of the cuts that were considered last year that would be able to generate some of these savings if we were to do them. So, of course, if there's other questions you have, we're happy to answer them and, prepare them. My recommendation at this point is that, we're not saying we're accepting any cuts, we're not saying we're rejecting any cuts at this point, although if there is something that you do know right off the bat that, don't bother spending any more time even looking into, of course, we can stop and won't mention it again. But that's kind of what we were thinking as we put these expense decreases in here, mostly to kind of let the board be aware of some of the options there are for significant cuts if we do need to make cuts, either to maintain operations, if the economy takes another dive, or to be able to make some cuts to provide other services that the board deems more important. So one of the items that's listed here is the reduction of street sweeping, and this is something that we looked at last year. Obviously, one of the questions we'd want to address is how often do other communities sweep their streets? And I don't know if there's any other questions the board may have or would want before we consider looking into reduction of street sweeping. Okay. Moving on to facilities. We've got the first item listed here, and several of these items you'll see in facilities are also similar to what you'll see when we get down to the Westmont Center. And these are items that have been cut from the budget as we've had, tight economic times. We've been kind of postponing some of our maintenance on facilities. And so a lot of these are items that we used to do and we're, want the board to consider doing again and kind of see what information you'd like from us to help with that consideration. So the first item is re-implementing our parking lot seal coating program. This is something we used to do, but as you can see on the sheet, it's been over 5 years since we've done this routine seal coating. So we'd be looking at setting up a schedule to take care of this either, annually or biannually. We do some of the parking lots one year and some the next year. So
Is some of this going to be pending on the green infrastructure? I mean, I know, Steve, you had talked about possibly going to the parking lots first as far as to the pavers and so forth, so.
Yeah, that type of infrastructure, if we were ever at a point where we were rebuilding, we would do that. This is just the top maintenance, the seal coating, mostly to seal the cracks up and keep water out of the subgrade to increase the life of the parking lot. But at such time something would be rebuilt, that would,
We'll look at it then.
that'll be the first look at anything, whether it's a street or parking lot. We'll be looking at that from now on.
Okay, thanks.
any other question on that? Okay. Fountain maintenance and repairs. We'll be looking at, so the item for consideration here is to repaint and seal the floor of the fountains, take care of some old lighting and replace some pumps. During this past summer, there were some issues with it where it was shut down and had to make repairs. We're looking to try to see if we can get some repairs done on that to take care of that fountain.
Were the repairs just mechanical, or were they any kind of vandalism or anything?
A little of all.
Moriel?
A little of both?
Yeah, there's always people that play with the stuff, but it's the painting and the internal maintenance on, beneath the water line.
Most of the repairs were done to the pump, were just minor capacitor issues that they had to replace.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Who was it? You did a wonderful job.
Mystery man, Noriel has treated. Okay. The next item is a maintenance proposal for generators at police and fire. This is something that, currently we don't have them on that maintenance contract. We're thinking it would be a good idea to put them on that contract. We just replaced generator at the police department, for the police and fire station there, and, at this point, we're realizing it would be good to get it on a maintenance proposal, so. Question on that one. The next item is power washing of all facilities. So we'd be looking at doing that to try to, improve the aesthetics, and prevent additional deterioration. Good
Have we ever
maintenance
done
issue.
it? Are we we're not doing that now, or?
We were doing that, we've done that before, but due to budget cuts, we, haven't
We
done it
haven't
for
done
quite a
it on a
while.
regular basis.
Yeah,
Kind of like the seal coat.
right,
Budgets got tighter, those were the types of things that were eliminated.
yeah.
Budget gets tighter, but the problem is that it costs you more in the long run.
In the
just
long
to
run,
fix it.
because
Don't keep it up, man.
now we're playing
Right.
catch-up.
Yeah.
Right, which is one of the reasons that now that, we're hoping that budget's not quite as tight, that's one of the things that we, want to consider restoring. All right, on to water. So again, we're looking at some aging equipment, and, we'll want to look at the same questions that we had talked about with the public works equipment, the age, the hours, those same kind of questions we'll address with the water. Any other water-specific related equipment questions that we'll want to address? Okay. Got our water meter replacement program. We have that this year. We replaced 1,000 meters this year in the budget. We're looking to do the same amount next year to continue with our water meter replacement program. My guess is that one of the questions that we'll address, which is what, we often will mention it at the budget, is kind of how many more do we have left? Where are we in the process? So we'll definitely be able to present information on that.
Again, as soon as you bring this subject up, we're probably gonna get more inquiries, so we might as well be ready to make the answers on whether these new meters that are part of that smart meter setup. Ron and I have talked a little bit about it. I know I've received some correspondence, I don't know if everybody else has, but there's one resident who just doesn't want any of these newfangled type meters anywhere near their homes.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't control the electric smart meter
Yeah.
program. That's driven by ComEd and the ICC approved.
Well, I think the problem is that some people look at it and they see the word meter and then everything gets lumped into,
Sure.
Yeah.
one shoe.
Some people are really anti-wireless that way, as we saw with the, radio towers and things like that.
Okay. The next item is be looking at replacing some garage doors and openers, the water division. Replacing a broken power washer. So our water division has a power washer that we use to wash the floors in vehicles. It's currently not working. We're looking at replacing it with a portable version that we could use, other locations as well. We're also looking at replacing a coin-operated water fill station. One of the things we'll want to verify, is how old the system is. But basically what this is where people can come and buy water at the water department. It's coin-operated. They put in quarters. They get water out. And we're looking at upgrading it. One of the challenges with the current system is that we don't have any ability to change the water rate. So they're still buying it at the rate that it was before Chicago increased their fees, before DuPage Water Commission increased their fees. And so it's a much cheaper way to buy water than it could be if we could update our fees. And so we think that if we are able to update the system and make it a little bit more accessible for people, maybe through a credit card swipe or some other easier method, and have the ability to change our rates, we'll be able to generate a little bit of additional water revenue. It's not going to be enough to pay for it, all in 1 year, but we think we can generate a little additional revenue, and you'll see that reflected down
Are a
here
lot
in
of
the
people
green.
taking advantage of that service?
I don't know for sure
I
how
didn't know
many.
I didn't know we
Now,
had it.
now you will.
Yeah, now I will.
Yeah.
Pull my truck over.
Especially if it's cheaper.
Want the pickup.
Is it by the gallon? Is that how it works? You bring a gallon?
Or is it more
Not by the
landscape?
gallon.
I think it's typical. Yeah, I think it's more for the landscaping
That's just deal around.
park district.
We fill up and.
Okay, but we'll be charging you more, sorry.
You put $4 in the vending mechanism and 1,000 gallons of water start getting pumped out, whether you're ready for it or not. You know, some people don't have 1,000 gallon capacity and, 800 go in their tank and then 200 go in the street, so.
This new system, you'll be able to program in or punch in how many gallons you actually want. The minimum will be 100 gallons. That's the smallest amount you'll be able to get. But you can say, I want 250 gallons if you have a 250 gallon tank, and you'll be able to pay the amount of the 250 gallons. Instead of paying $4 for 1,000 gallons, you can pay whatever the rate would be for 250 gallons. So it's going to be a better system. Other towns have used this, and the credit card system. What's nice is the clerk's office would handle all the finance part of it. The credit card would be swiped. The contractor would pay the clerk's office directly. The water department would be completely out of it.
How many gallons you guesstimate we sell a year?
I think last year we sold 58,000 gallons.
And is that to contractors?
Yeah, a lot of landscapers, because we don't allow them to hook up to our fire hydrants. Since 9/11, the security thing, nobody's supposed to use any of our fire hydrants, and the fire department's aware of that, the police department's aware of it, so they have to come to our water department to get water.
Even the fire department can't use
Very well, thank you, Ken, thank you.
So they fill their tanks and
Did not realize that, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Okay, and we'll definitely answer the question, what are we currently getting on it? What do we think we can generate in additional revenue?
It's another business you should.
Yeah, it's a great question.
What's our cost versus what we're selling?
But that also appears to be
Right.
something if you didn't have the service, they're gonna
Yeah.
tap somehow.
And I think,
The hydrants or something.
I don't know.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
Are we comparable to what we should be with the increases that we've been getting from the county?
Sounds like that's a good move to get that updated then.
If you didn't have, I just said to Harold, if you didn't have it, they're gonna figure out how to tap into the fire hydrants illegally.
Right.
They're gonna get water someplace, especially the
Yeah, but at least if
landscape.
somebody sees that, they're gonna call.
They're gonna call.
Yep.
And if you have the other service, then there's no reason for them to do that, then they deserve to get clobbered. Okay.
This next item is also something that's come up before and has often been just sort of removed because we didn't have the money to cover it. So it's just sort of, again, for your information, if we have the money, something for you to consider. The water department has been, interested in installing drinking fountains, throughout our facilities that have the ability to fill up water bottles, similar to the drinking fountain that was installed up here for us. It's a generous donation. So we'd be looking at doing something similar in our other facilities.
That'd be great.
Getting the rest of them donated? Is that what you're looking to do?
Donations would be wonderful, but my expectation is we'd have to pay for some.
I'll talk to somebody. I know somebody.
There you
We'll make
go.
some-
Yeah.
We'll make some calls.
Yeah.
I'd like to watch this conversation.
Okay. The next item is looking at increasing our water permit fees, and this is something that, has been done previously. I think it was a year or two ago when we did our full water revenue study. We kind of looked at what infrastructure needs we had, what other needs we have in our water department to make sure that our current fee system is, we'll be able to cover that, and that's something we want to look into again. And, once we review it, propose whatever adjustments seem to be the right option. So I guess at this point, we can see if there's any questions you may have. The analysis hasn't been completed at this point, but if there's any specific questions, we'll make sure to include them in the analysis. Okay, we'll just probably do it similar to how we did it previously. We talked about the water fill station, and then we've got elimination of well number 9 at Fitzworthy Park. This is something that may have some initial one-time costs, but could save on maintenance fees going forward. I don't know that it'll be significant, but we wanted to at least bring it to the board's attention.
That was the shallow well, wasn't it? Yeah, I thought
Yep.
it was.
I thought we considered that once before, and I can't remember why.
I
Did we
think
consider that
last year we were
before?
looking at,
We have actually already abandoned it,
Six.
but there's a building that goes with it now that we do not need, and what we were considering before, we were going to raise the building, but it's on a park site, so if the park district had interest in it, but the conclusion is that it was too expensive, it was too much maintenance needed to it, so that interest has gone away, and now we have a one-time cost of eliminating the building, but then from then on, all our maintenance costs go to zero.
How many wells we got left then, Steve?
Two deep wells, one deep well,
One well
up by Micro Center there.
Well, 13 up by
Yeah,
Jewel.
no, don't tell
Which
them
we
what it
have
is.
no intention of getting rid of.
No, because that one could supply enough, at least fire protection wise, if we lost, for some reason, less electricity. or
Right, I
something.
just want to make sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're gonna maintain that one as long as we can. Going back to well 9 though, real quick, sorry to interrupt, but I did talk to a lot of residents, and Chief Mulhern could probably back me up on, there's a lot of crime that goes on in that park, and I'm sure Mayor Gunter knows this too. And it's a big hangout for people, for a lot of kids, and I've talked to a lot of residents, and they would be gratefully appreciative if we got rid of that building, because it is a big hangout for kids, and, yeah. So, we talked to the Park District, see if they wanted to keep
nice
it, they said they had no need for it.
I might have
It's a
questions
win-win
about
if we
Chinese
eliminated that building.
And it's
You
very
know,
expensive
this
to
thing is-
abandon a well. There's a large cost
Back in
in
the
pulling it
corner,
and
yeah.
filling it correctly. And so we don't do it at all unless there's something physically wrong with the well and we can't maintain it, then.
Kind of like what we did by Oakwood, over by the high school?
Exactly, as soon as there's an issue, then it's more expensive to repair than it is to abandon, and then we go to that route.
Right.
all right. The next items here deal with the Westmont Center. And so the items here for consideration, these, again, so the board's aware, this is funded from the hotel motel tax fund. So we've been talking about general fund. We wanted to kind of cover all the public works things together. So we're now moving on to the Westmont Center, which is in the convention tourism fund, and the Westmont Center itself is primarily supported by the common area maintenance that is paid by the tenants of the Westmont Center, not completely because we can't make a profit on it, or if we did, we'd then have to start paying property taxes on it. So it's not completely supported by that, and it's not intended to be completely supported by that. It's subsidized to some extent by the hotel motel tax fund. And so just, as you're aware, these are the items we're talking about in the Westmont Center. So we're looking at potentially repainting some of the common areas. It's, was done previously around 2007, but we could, look at painting some of those, do some wood trim maintenance, and then power washing the building and windows, and kind of doing some additional floor maintenance. And then the parking lot seal coating. So as I mentioned, a lot of these are similar kinds of things we've discussed with doing with our other facilities. Any Westmont Center specific questions? Okay. And then the potential increase for revenue is, review and recalculation of the common area maintenance fees that the tenants pay. This is something that we, kind of do occasionally just to make sure that we're, charging them for really what our costs are for the building or something close to it. So we'll be redoing that analysis again this year.
You mean, when you say costs, it's just direct operating costs for the year, and not any of this maintenance isn't built into it, is it?
We can do it either way, but I would think that a lot of this maintenance things would be something you'd want to build into it. We wouldn't want to necessarily charge them, for the full cost of something in a single year, but you'd want to consider those types of things in the common area
I
maintenance.
mean, they're not right now. You're basically just charging whatever our direct costs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's,
that's what I
yeah. I think it's whatever our direct cost was a year or two ago.
Okay.
All the rentable space over there is rented.
A little bit downstairs, about half the downstairs is unused, but everything else is occupied.
Were there tenants in there?
Basement.
Were there tenants in there before?
Not since the historical society, and then the chamber makes good use of the space, but it's usually more of a special event-driven common area.
That's that one large room.
Across from the one large room that is like the meeting space, and then on the other side, there is another room about half that size that's available for expanding. If you were at the last chamber event they had there, they were using both spaces.
Yeah, that's right.
They're doing that open house,
Yeah.
yeah.
When the Historical Society was in there, we were not charging them a rent either.
Right, and that was years ago, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, moving on to the fire department. So the first item that's here up for your consideration from the fire department is dealing with paid-on-call firefighter incentives. This is due to an issue that's, not unknown to the board. As you're aware and have heard previously, through committee meetings and other budget meetings and things, with our part-time fire department, we're able to save significantly from the cost of having a full-time department. And one of the things that we're facing right now is some of the other departments are making it harder for their employees to participate as part-time employees. And so one of the things that we want to make sure we do is adjust our programs and make sure our programs are competitive and something that our employees want to continue doing, and that we can attract additional employees to be able to continue to maintain our program. And so at this point, we don't have a specific example of exactly what sort of incentive we want to do. As you can see, we've listed some different things that are being considered. We want to be able to do things with, the hourly rate for shift and duty chief hours that are being worked, potentially looking into things, with 457 plans, potentially some sort of pension contribution, something to be able to provide some additional incentive. So kind of wanted to get that up in front of the board, see if there's any comments or anything we can specifically look into or specifically address as we kind of go through this analysis. But at this point, we're still early in the budget process and still coming up with our specific exact recommendations. Wanted to kind of get it in front of the board to get your initial thoughts or ideas or questions you may have on it.
Are we still waiting to get the determination of the IMRF for the firemen?
Yes, my understanding is we're still waiting to see from the legal channels what's going on with what's happening with IMRF.
Just a curious question, what if they had to go IMRF? What dollar amount is that?
I'm trying to remember, I know we did some rough guesstimates. I don't recall
It's
the exact dollar
substantial,
amount,
though.
but it is a significant dollar amount if they do have to go towards IMRF. If they do, and that is what's determined that has to happen, that would probably provide the incentive that we're looking for. We wouldn't necessarily be looking at any additional incentives beyond that.
Okay.
But, and I don't recall the figure, but I believe it's, I don't know, I want to say it's around a couple $100,000 a year.
That's what I thought.
So it's,
Up to $250,000.
yeah, probably around that amount. Yeah.
And that's
Spencer, I
annually.
apologize, I was a little late, but as the budget workshops work on, these numbers will be filled in and we'll have a
Yeah,
much
so-
better idea.
That's why it's
Yeah,
quick
sorry,
tonight.
let me.
Yeah, especially
yeah.
like on the Westmont Center items and things like that.
Yeah, so, basically, what we kind of addressed at the very beginning was that with the budget timeline, what we're doing this year is a little bit different because we're having this meeting this early. Typically, what happens is departments at this point are just preparing their budget and the board doesn't hear about this until March or April. And then at that point, whatever questions the board has, staff gets a very quick answer to and kind of can look into their ideas fairly superficially. But because it's a very quick turnaround, you only have, a week or two to get the additional information requested by the board. It's not something that we can look into as much as we would like to look into the board's ideas during the budget process. So the point of this meeting is to say, before we even know the dollar amounts or anything like that, just very early in the process, as soon as we've sort of identified, here's things we want to start looking into, we're interested in getting the board's perspective on, as we look into this, what are things that we should be considering, what are things you want us to look into, and then kind of at the end, if there's other things that we've missed, that we want to look into this next year in the budget process, we want to be able to start looking into them earlier in the process instead of waiting for the board's input in March. So right now, we don't have any numbers. By March, we'll have all the numbers, we'll have the figures, we'll have, the revenue numbers, we'll have the expense numbers, and know what happens as we change and adopt this idea versus that idea, how does that all change our bottom line? At this point, this is just kind of getting the board in on what the departments typically do as their early process is sort of kind of the brainstorming. We've got these different ideas, and when we start looking into these ideas, what are the questions we want to make sure we can address as, to provide you the information that you're going to need. So this is, yes, very much the early piece of the process. Certainly we'll have real numbers for you. Well, we'll have numbers for you. We didn't have numbers today. So we'll have numbers for you as we get to the March budget meetings, along with this other information we're looking for.
Spencer, just because there was a figure mentioned just a little while ago about the IMRF,
Yeah,
a couple $100,000 maybe?
yeah, roughly.
What, just for the public's sake, what is the amount of dollars saved by having the police, or fire department the way it is now? Is a paid on call versus having a full-time?
Historically,
Historically, I mean, just a ballpark figure so they understand.
Ballpark has been a couple of $1 million. You know, some of the numbers that we're using, we've talked with a community up north, Northfield, that actually has their firefighters on IMRF, and they've used it as an incentive to maintain firefighters. So they've flipped it around. They've seen it as a benefit. But yeah, you're right. Chief, do you have any?
I just want the public
current
sitting there
data?
saying,
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
we're gonna spend another 200,000 or whatever it ends up being for the fire department without realizing, and I still think a lot of residents don't understand that,
Right.
the total savings that we do have by the fire department that we've got.
Yeah, if we had to convert our department today to full-time, it'd probably be about $3 million more a year to do that. We kind of watch that and run the numbers about every other year. It's kind of like in our strategic plan, and we keep track of that. And I think the figure for converting the fire department to IMRF is about $255,000. So.
Okay.
Also like to add, the IMRF is one of the healthiest pension funds in the state.
Yeah.
The police and fire pension funds, the local funds, was the piece that was left out that we talked about at the last meeting. There's been no reform done there. So, you know, I think it's a good thing potentially a good thing for the employees as well. It's not as rich a pension fund as police and fire, but it's certainly the healthiest state fund in the state.
Yes, and I was just going to mention the IMRF fund, you know, in addition to being one of the healthiest, you know, or the healthiest in the state, is also one that's often used as an example in publications about, you know, kind of the good pension systems versus the ones that have issues. It's touted as an example, you know, throughout the nation as a good pension system with the IMRF pension.
And I just want to add about the incentives. 20 years ago, the big incentive for our part-time program was the hourly pay that we paid the gentlemen in training. The fortunate thing, we don't have a lot of turnover. So now training's not an incentive anymore because everybody's got all the training classes that they can get. And but hourly pay is down in about the middle now. We're not up in the top 1 or 2 anymore. So that's why we're looking at some of these other things.
And the union doesn't want us to have it this way either.
No.
Yes. Yes.
Just wanted to mention, you forgot to mention on the timeline, that you are also giving the trustees additional time to submit questions to you.
Yes.
If they have additional questions or concerns after tonight.
Yes, so kind of when we get to the agenda, kind of at the end, under last steps, you know, I just wanted to kind of let the board be aware that, you know, if you do have other questions after tonight, you can certainly submit them to me, and we'll continue to consider those in the budget process. So, you know, feel free to email me, we'll pass them on to the departments and make sure we include them in our process as we do our analysis on these different programs. So just because you don't think of them tonight, that's fine. If you're like me, you'll go home and say, oh, I should have asked this question and this question and this question, and that's fine. We're obviously happy to continue to consider those as well. Okay, the next item. So I guess, first of all, any other questions or any specific things we can look into POC incentive program that haven't been already mentioned or addressed tonight? Okay. The next item is a new candidate program, which is basically to be able to try to get some additional personnel to use as a pool to be able to help cover our shifts. I mean, that's basically the idea. Right, Chief? You can add to that, sorry.
Yeah, we basically have two programs. We have a program for certified firefighter paramedics, and a program that, where we get the young kids out of high school that want to become in the fire service, that need to be sponsored by fire department to get in their firefighter to get their EMT or paramedics. And the program we have for that is a 2-year program. And it's a program, I was talking to Manager Searle about it, that we really need to institute this next year because of the pressure we're getting on our full-time individuals. And we're currently got 3 individuals that will be leaving between February and April because of their employers. And so if we bring these candidates in, bring them in from the beginning, they're not employed by full-time employers yet, and we'll have them for several years until that happens. So that's our thinking. We got about 100 applications on file right now.
Okay, any other questions on that one? Okay, there's an equipment account. So again, this is one of the items that has been cut several years in a row in the budget is, that we've been reducing the amount that we're spending to purchase equipment and replacement equipment. And so the item for consideration, is just to kind of increase that amount so we can start replacing some of the equipment we've been postponing the replacement of this equipment for the last several years.
Also, to add to that, the reason we did put that in there is because we're going to be probably losing one of our fire districts this next year, which all the fire district has graciously helped us buy some equipment with some extra money that they have. And with possibly losing that district, which did contribute a lot of money to us getting equipment, including vehicles, we need to put some money into the other equipment account.
The money that's with that district now, what happens to it?
Well, they just purchased 2 brand-new Zoll heart monitors for us at $60,000. And they just wrote us a check to send one of our captains to a Fire Officer 3 certification program. And I'll be meeting with them in February and bringing some other equipment things to them. But they're in the process of wanting to spend that money down to
That's what I was going to ask if.
to about $10,000 in their account.
I'd rather see us get it than
Yeah.
somebody
And
else.
they would like to see that too.
Okay.
This is part of the chairman's effort to reduce the paper districts. We had a side discussion with Downers Grove. They're going through the same process right now with their Fairview Fire Protection District in 2 other areas in their town, one of which they did not even realize they were providing service for a number of years and weren't actually getting any revenue to offset the cost of that service. What they're doing is they're setting up a special service area, and they're working with the county to do that. And I have talked to the village attorney about the process and the next steps, and probably setting up a meeting with the county, because somebody's got to provide that service, and they have to pay for that service somehow. So if it's not a taxing body, then a special service area seems to be maybe a logical answer for that. So we'll be looking at that, talking with the county, and
Well, what's the county's responsibility at that point?
they can provide the service, I suppose.
They do for the sheriff's, the sheriff's office does it, and so what would they do in?
Well, but they don't have a countywide fire.
I understand it, but wouldn't they
fire
contract with us to do it
protection
instead?
district, Contract with a fire protection district or some other district to do it. There are other options, I suppose. What Downers Grove has historically done, instead of in our case where the residents are paying a tax, they've used a formula where they evaluate the cost of service using their assessed valuation. They divide it into the number of households, and then they actually bill the number of households. And they've been doing that for a number of years, except for this one area that apparently was an oversight. Again, though, 2 of those areas are literally taxing districts that may not be levying. And the county chairman wants to see those go away, disappear.
So the county wants to reduce the amount of districts, but they're gonna leave it up to the towns that are providing the service to handle that form, or is the county gonna come up with a solution and saying, well, this is what we would prefer to happen?
Well, it's part of a philosophical presentation that the chairman came into office with, and that is to eliminate the number of taxing bodies that we have here in DuPage County. We have the highest number of taxing bodies in this, virtually in the country, if not number one, we're number two behind California. So it's an admirable goal to try to reduce the levels of government. The question is, how do you provide that service? And we are providing the service now, but the way we've been doing it is by creating what they call the paper district. It's just it's a taxing body that really doesn't exist other than to tax to provide that service. So we're looking at other ways to fund that. I think it's still logical for the departments that provide service, that are closest by those homes, to provide that service, and we want to continue to do that. But we also need to be able to receive some compensation for that service. It can't be free.
I'm not disagreeing with anything you say, but I would just like the county to come up with the way to be able to handle that, since they're taking it away and leaving their people hanging. Their unincorporated areas to hang, to sit there and say, go out and figure it out on your own, or the towns are just gonna handle it and the county doesn't have to do anything.
Well, I think that in a way they're helping as a partner in those discussions. At least that's my impression of what they're doing in Downers Grove.
Okay.
And that's what we need to initiate with them. I mean, we were part of the discussion with them. It was between us, Downers Grove, and DuPage County when we eliminated the Westmont Water Surface Protection District. So they're not, washing their hands and saying, we
Okay.
don't want to have any.
I just want to make sure that that wasn't happening, that's all.
No,
Okay.
I don't think that's the impression. But I know the chief has been feeling some uncertainty because the communication he's getting from the district itself, they seem to have some uncertainty. So I think the next step is we've got to reach out to the county and try to bring them to the table and figure out what their time frame is. We don't know what that is yet either. So.
Let's face it, if we were Liberty Park, we'd want to make sure our people were covered.
Yeah, and we, the chief said to me the other day, we will provide coverage. We're not gonna walk away from that community. Those folks, go to our school districts, they participate in our community in many ways, so we don't wanna walk away and not provide service, but we've gotta figure out a fair way to make sure they're paying for services other residents are paying for that same level of service.
Right.
Okay, the next item on the list is fire revenues. This is also something that's been discussed, at least briefly, at Public Safety Committee. And this is the idea, as the board's aware, last year we adopted some increases in some revenues and then also implemented some new revenues. And one of the things that we did when we implemented the new fees in the fire was, we looked at what some of the other nearby communities were doing, but then we tried to be a little bit lower than the other communities in what we were asking for with the fees. And in consultation with the company that we're currently looking at using to do our collections, what they've indicated is that poses a problem for a couple of reasons. Number one is if the fee isn't high enough, it's not worth their time to continue pursuing the collection, so we're less likely to get the money. The other issue with it is insurance companies have a system where they look to see what is typically being charged, and if it doesn't meet that, whether it's lower or higher, they're unlikely to pay it because they feel that it's not necessarily to recoup your costs and they think they can fight it easier. And so insurance companies, interestingly, are actually less likely to pay it because it is lower. And so the company that we're working with collections has recommended that either we increase some of these fees to be more consistent with other communities that are doing them, or we sort of, accept the fact that we're not going to be getting as much revenue from the collections because insurance companies are not going to be willing to pay it, and it's going to be harder for them to collect the money because they're not willing to, go through the process multiple times if the percentage they're getting is of a smaller cut. So I think this is something that probably will need some additional discussion at the committee level, and I'm guessing that's probably where we'll want to discuss this in a little bit more depth because this is kind of a big decision, not something we want to just deal with, in the couple of moments we have tonight, nor while we're trying to deal with the rest of the budget things. So I'm guessing we'll want to talk about this in more depth at a committee level. But are there any other questions that we know of right now that we can kind of prepare, I guess, to discuss with you at the committee level? One question that has been raised, is there another company out there that we could look at and try to see if there's another company that can provide this service, maybe that is willing to touch it more times and try to get the collections a little bit more. I don't know if there's any other questions the board knows they have right now, or if we want to just discuss it more at a committee.
I think committee.
Yep.
Get more information.
Okay. The next item that's on the list is a decrease in the telephone account. This is something that, the department's been very conscientious at trying to control these costs and reduce this, and so because of that, we think that we can reduce the amount that's budgeted for this without any change in services. So I'm guessing, any other questions on that? Good job, that's excellent. So you'll notice there's a big blank line here. Those of you on the tablets, this was so that we could print it and have it print out right, so you can just go past this. You may see other big lines further down, just go past them. Okay, the next item that's on this is maintenance service for equipment. This is something where we've been sort of spending less on the services to repair the equipment, because some of it is because we've got some newer equipment now, and some of it is because we're doing some of the repairs in-house. And so we're thinking we may be able to cut that budget down a little bit. There probably will be an increase in the budget where we actually are paying to buy parts for these services, because we're doing that more often now that we're doing this in-house. But overall, we still think there can be a little bit of a budget reduction there without any impact in services. This next item is an item that was presented at last year again as something that's not necessarily what we're looking for as an idea that we're recommending, but is an option that's out there. And this would be to reduce the number of contract medics that we have per shift. We have the ability to cover that to a large extent with our personnel that are trained as mechanics, but it may reduce the availability to a little extent. We may occasionally have times where we can't cover all the calls that we would be able to cover under our current system. So that's something that, again, is not something we want to consider, but just sort of as a reminder, this is something that was addressed previously and is an option if we had to make some catastrophic cuts, but not necessarily something we're recommending at this point. I don't know if there's any additional cuts. I know it was something that was presented last year. It's possible, it's not ideal, and there will be others through this that you see that are similar in nature. Any other questions about that at this time? If we do it, that you'll want to know about, or anything for March? No? Okay. This next item is also the same type of thing, which is we're just sort of reminding you some of the significant cuts that were identified in the past years. If we do end up needing to make cuts to be able to provide other increases in other areas, these are the types of cuts that would have to be made, as the board's aware and recalls from last time. We're in general cut pretty close to the bone, and any cuts to provide increases anywhere else would have some significant impacts. And so one of these other ones is a potential reduction in incentive pay. It's something we've done a couple of years ago. Obviously, that goes exactly against the point that we just made, that we need to try to increase the incentive to belong to the department. So while it's an option, again, it's not something we're recommending. We don't necessarily think that it's a good idea in the direction we want to go, but we want to make the board aware that, that is an option, and these types of cuts are the things that are out there that the board considered previously when they were looking at reducing the budget last year, but decided to not make these kind of cuts. And there'll be additional ones coming up, of a similar nature in police as well. Any questions on anything else with fire? Okay. Moving on to police. This first item is something that's been discussed at the committee, and I'm sure we'll have some additional committee level discussion, with this. This one is the Drug Enforcement Agency, where we would hire another employee to be able to take one of our employees and send them to do temporary duty assignment with the DEA. Excuse me. This is something that last year in the budget process, this was presented with the expectation of some large amounts of revenue. As we've kind of gone forward into the process, we've realized that we don't actually know for sure the amount of revenue that we'd be generating. We probably generate some, but not to the same extent that we had originally thought we would be generating. We wanted to mention it to the board so they're aware of it, and I guess get any questions that you may have about it so we can prepare those as we discuss it further. Any specific questions on that? Okay, I know it's been discussed at committee, so that makes sense that there's kind of discussed that already. The next item is the return of a problem-oriented policing detective. This is something that we had for a while, and then we budgeted for it for a year, and then but never were able to fill it because we were holding off to wait to see what happened with the economy and with home rule issues. And then this last year in the budget, it was determined that we wouldn't budget to fund it if there was extra money around. It would be a great thing to be able to do, but it was sort of held off on again. And so we're kind of presenting it again as another item for consideration, as it's something that we had previously, which was cut due to budget cuts. When we prepare to present this information, is there any additional information that you would be interested in? Okay.
I guess, Spencer, just to,
Yeah.
just to, I guess, further define what a problem-oriented policing detective does.
Okay,
I mean, the code enforcement's pretty obvious.
right.
Or maybe we'll have that answer right now.
Problem-oriented the POP detective, in short, was a position, as Spencer mentioned, that we had before the village went to home rule. After home rule, it worked very closely with the code enforcement, and his position and his duties increased by helping code enforcement doing inspections. He was going to be actually licensed as an inspector as well. It helps this way that when code enforcement has complaints or warrants that need to be served, he can go out and do that. He'll go out and do inspections. Before we had our home rule and the housing ordinances, our POP detective would go with code enforcement and do inspections outside of buildings in general areas, and we can do that again. Basically, yes, assist code enforcement. That's not the only duties that are involved. They would also be assigned any gang activities, any activities where there's a problem in Westmont. There's cars speeding up and down my street. Just because he's a detective does not mean that he will not go out and handle patrol duties as well. If we had a large, say, large burglary spree going on. Right now, the detectives to do stuff, puts an extra manpower, he would go and see that. Basically what it is, anytime there's a problem that officer can address, he would be assigned to do so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. The next item on the list is some additional, for your consideration, is some additional budget for training and the associated increase you'd have with overtime to be able to train some of our officers for that sort of training, I guess. And so obviously when we have an officer that goes to training, we then have overtime because we have to fill that officer's spot on the street. And so it costs not just the cost of the training class, but also the overtime to send the officers to those classes. Any questions on that? Guess is it? And we'll, be able to provide you with information on, what type of training, is sort of there, what are the requirements and those kind of things. We'll be able to provide that kind of information to you, of course. Okay, the next item is building maintenance and some equipment issues. There's several different things in this that are also things that were cut over the past several years. So one of the items that you'll recall from last year was a reduction in the cleaning crew hours, as well as things that we've cut back on like window cleaning. And then additionally, there's some chairs that are in our lobby, the roll call break room, and some offices that would be nice to be able to replace.
Carrie, did you ever get your chair?
No.
It was in the budget. budget last year.
He didn't get it.
No?
Jeez.
Take one of these.
You got a good one.
Here, take Bruce's.
Take this one.
Should make sure he gets his chair. It's there. All right, we'll have to get one for him.
If we're down
Okay.
to deciding whether we're gonna be cleaning windows or not, we're in bigger trouble than that. We can't be worrying about
Yeah.
small stuff like this. We're gonna have to take the bigger hit on something than that.
Okay. Wanted to make the board aware that we will be seeing a reduction in revenue as well as increases with the loss of our extra duty that we've been doing with Ty. So we've stopped providing their security, and so because of that, we'll see a reduction in revenue and an offsetting reduction in expense, and that there won't be any net change, but you'll notice those accounts will be decreased. Additionally, as we talked about with the DEA employee, we'll see some additional revenues due to asset forfeiture. We don't know what those will be. We'd hope to have some more of an estimate, but that's something that even, in March, we may not have a good estimate as to what sort of revenue we'll be getting in, because it will depend on where they're assigned and what happens with those assignments. Sure.
Recently, within the last couple of weeks, we assisted DEA on a case in town. The asset forfeiture Spencer just mentioned, we will get 2% of the amount seized. We're expecting to get close to $1,500 just for assisting him in one day. So again, that's not being part of the task force. We want to do more of that, and that's the reason for this.
The next revenue item that I wanted to mention was video gaming, and this is something that the board is familiar with. As you know, we've had a few businesses that have just started this. We've received about 1 month. We've received information about how much they've earned in a single month, so it's very much too early to tell how this is really going to be doing with the budget, but the indications we've had looking at our current businesses, looking at businesses that are applying for it, and kind of seeing what's going on with other municipalities is that we look like we're tracking well on the budget. As you'll recall, we budgeted for a portion of the year this year because we were starting late. We are hopeful, or maybe cautiously optimistic, that we'll be able to increase that line item at least a little bit once we are looking at a whole year's worth of revenue, but we'll have to see as we get more money coming in.
What did the village get for the first month?
It was close to $2,000, about 1,800 something.
And would we project like 30-some thousand for the year?
Yeah, and that first month was, we had 2 businesses, and I don't think both of them had it the entire month.
One did have it for the entire month, one had it only for a week. The reason we also feel optimistic is when we did our original survey with the board, we had less businesses that were indicating that they were going to be interested in video gaming. That number has changed, and it's actually increased. More businesses are moving towards it than we originally anticipated.
Plus the new businesses that weren't
New
anticipated.
businesses coming in town as well, yes.
It's interesting, there was an article in the paper, Woodridge is now considering it because of the loss of business that their businesses have now that are going to other towns.
See that one?
Yeah.
It's a nice article.
I've also received phone call from Lyle asking
They're looking into it too, huh?
our ordinance.
And I heard that Darien may be reconsidering.
I think Darien
Darren's already
Yeah,
in.
Darien's doing it.
Yeah,
Willowbrook went recently within the last 2 months.
They got them in chunks.
Oak Brook Terrace is the only other closest community to us right now. And again, I was approached by a vendor, asked to see if we could help Woodridge. I just sent him my information.
Cool.
So the next item is the extra duty assignments. This is, as I said, we talked about in green the loss in revenue. This is the loss in expense, which is offsetting that. And then this last item is, these next 2 items are similar to the last couple items we mentioned with regards to fire and also with Public Works with street sweeping. These are items that are things that were listed for consideration previously. Again, they're not items that we recommend. They're items that would reflect potentially a cut in service and are not something that we're recommending. But as a reminder, if we do get to the point where some of these increases are something we want to do, and, we run low on additional revenue, and then we still want to do some of the increases, here are some of the options that we have for decreases that could be considered if that's the direction we wanted to go. And one of these items is the reduction in staffing minimums, which is adjusting the number of officers that we require to be out there available or sort of on the street for each shift. And we would reduce that, we'd schedule more than the minimum, but if somebody were to call in sick, then we wouldn't use overtime to fill that vacancy. If we were to do that, our response time to non-emergency events would, of course, be reduced. There may be some services we'd have to look at reducing, such as, being able to respond to locked cars, if there's not an emergency, not anybody locked in the car, but just to help somebody open the car door, those type of things, the vacation watches, cruising by the schools, those kind of things may be something that would have to take a backseat if we were to adopt this reduction in the staffing minimums. Again, it's not something we're recommending at this time, it's to make the board aware of the option that's up for consideration if we need to go to that extent. And the same thing, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for me, I would take this off altogether. I mean, we've already done that. I mean, we've already reduced, and we've been in situations where we were bare bones, and it only takes one bad event. Just for myself, I don't like the idea of reducing staffing that way.
I hear reducing school safety, I cringe, in this
Even
day
if
and
it's
age.
helping with it's service to our customers, which are our residents.
Okay. So is that the consensus of the board?
Especially with all the new laws coming in January 1st. I know I'm going to get caught on my cell phone, and I want you to be able to catch me, You can't use your cell phone now, January 1st. I know I'm going to get a ticket.
So is that the consensus of the board, then completely remove this from consideration at this point?
Well, that's
and
just
not-
me. I don't know.
Don't
if
bring it up
anybody else
again?
feels.
Or is there another way of handling it that's gonna be cheaper?
For
The dog
example,
calls instead.
like,
Instead, let's say, is there a more community service officers we could have instead?
For some of
Bring in
those
another
other
one
things.
For some of that stuff, so it takes the officer,
yeah,
if it's a cheaper way of doing it, then
maybe that is a thought. If we
Something to
could
think about,
quantify what types of, things non-sworn personnel could do, maybe it is hiring a few part-time people.
and if it isn't, then.
Yeah, that's a thought. Yeah, maybe we should just leave it on there and discuss those options. It's a good thought.
I like that idea of the community service officers, yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay. Similarly, this other item to stop paying for crossing guards or to kind of force the schools to pay for it, this is something that was mentioned at previous budgets. The schools, have always indicated they're not interested in paying for this. This is something that historically we have paid for, but by statute, the responsibility for it does fall on the schools if the schools want to provide it. But we have paid for it for years, and none of the schools are excited about the idea of taking on this additional increase.
Have there ever been a time when the schools did pay for it? I can't recall it.
Not as far as we know, yeah. Chief is indicating no.
Yeah, we've always,
Yeah.
that's been our, yeah, that's what I thought.
We can, revisit that. Last time we looked at it, the majority of communities, it was paid for by the municipality. But there were some that did it by the school district, if I recall. But we can certainly look at that again.
How much are we talking about?
I mean, I don't know exactly, but it's around, I want to say it's around like 25,000 or so. I can see what it was last year.
Correct, it's around 25, 30,000, and we outsource to Andy Frame. We no longer do it ourselves, we outsource to them, because we ended up with a savings that way as well.
I'd say before we even not even think about it anymore, we should leave it on the back burner just because of the issues the school district's gonna have coming up soon. That, I'd like to see what happens with all that and the help they may need, so this might be something that.
We provide this private and public school, right? Any crossing in the,
Yes.
yeah. So it's
Basic-
not just the public schools.
Both school districts, 60 and 201 in Holy Trinity.
Okay.
So then these local crossing guards are contracted through Andy Frame?
Yes. Most of them are still our old crossing guards from when we were guards, they're
There's
still
all
there.
I've seen there for years.
However, the service is better, they have a supervisor, Al Rhodey is out checking on them. They provide the equipment, they provide the training. They do everything for us that helps us a lot better. And also, it's nice for the crossing guards, they're also able to go and do work as Andy Frayne at ushers and events, venues, United Center, other places like that. So they also have an additional employment opportunities.
And it reduced our cost, didn't it?
Yes,
When we
did.
outsourced it.
Yes.
It was a pretty good savings.
And they also get the backup in case somebody's sick, they've got somebody else who will
Yeah.
go.
Yes, they have substitutes, crossing guards, where before we would have to put an officer out there or a CSO out there as well.
Okay. Comments on that one? Okay, move on to community development. The first item on this list is an economic development portion of what community development does. So one of the things that the board will recall from last year was the addition of attendance at the ICSC, the International Conference of Shopping Centers, where, you know, we're able to attract some economic development. So we began budgeting to attend for that last year. And this item for your consideration is to increase the number of employees that currently attend. Currently Shannon Malik attends, and we'd be looking at, you know, having Larry Forsberg also attend as a member of our Economic Development Partnership from the Chamber, and then maybe another staff member as well. And so that's the item for this consideration, to try to increase some of our visibility. And the other item along with this is, you know, seeing if we want to also pay in with Choose DuPage to be able to use their booth and participate in their booth at the ICSC National Conference, where we feel that would generate some additional visibility for the village and would be beneficial. So that's sort of the item for consideration. I don't know if there's any questions you're going to want us to address, other than, again, of course, the cost. Okay. The next item is some items that were identified through some previous studies that we've had for some gateway and wayfinding signage throughout the village. So the gateway signs would be sort of the welcome to Westmont sign as we come into Westmont, being able to see something that sort of identifies it as our community. That was something that was, you know, addressed in the comprehensive plan, that would be a good thing to do. And then similarly, there's been some indications through, I believe through the comprehensive plan, as well as through our downtown parking study, that some wayfinding signage would be very useful in the downtown. And so this would be the ability to get these signs made and put up. And, you know, as we get more details as to the exact cost and the impact of it, we'll determine whether it fits better under capital or under the general fund. But at this point, we wanted to address it as part of community development.
If there's any possibility of this being charged with hotel tax dollars?
We could probably look at getting some of that charged to hotel tax dollars, and we would definitely do that.
Because
So,
I think that
yep.
would be a nice to indicate in the future, when we start plugging
It
dollars.
is somewhat promotional.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
absolutely 110% promotional.
And then, Mr. Mayor, I know we've talked at the Rotary Club, is there a tie-in here to do like a service wall? I know we talked about having the service clubs recognized, that used to be, and it seems like over the years, that's kind of
Out by the wayside.
fallen by the wayside, and I don't know if that was something we were gonna consider with that, you know, with that wayfinding.
Sure.
Last night at Westmont First, it came up under miscellaneous about a community signs that would announce things and locations for that. Those folks were overwhelmingly supporting an idea that we would have electronic signs north end or south end of town, or center of town or
I
something,
think I got a meeting at 10 in the morning with someone about that.
to hear more about that.
I
Yeah, it
more
was very,
about that.
very hot topic.
Larry
very-
McIntyre.
Felt it was very much needed.
Yeah.
So if that was a category, that would be good.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great
I
consideration.
think, Spencer, and any item that has any potential to be charged to hotel tax dollars, can you put a notation in when we get the dollar amounts, that that's
Sure.
a possibility, and what you project
Yep.
would be the percent?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can work with our
Well,
attorney
really
on.
going back on that, Mr. Mayor, is that you could want to argue that sending the attendees to the convention is part of tourism also? I would think, right?
I think you could.
I mean, you're trying to increase
Well, you
tourism.
can ask
by-
Trustee Addington, because he created the
Trustee
whole,
Addington, bend the rules.
years ago.
Probably a pretty
Can look
fine
into that.
line. You could probably spin it.
It would be, well, it's tourism, you're trying to promote. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some argument to be made. We can check with our attorney and kind of see what percentage of it would be that. I think, you know, you could certainly charge a portion of it to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would think you could make that argument. Okay. Okay. Similarly, I think we have a similar opportunity with the next item, that we'd want to look into that, as we do with all of our economic development type of things. We've got, this next item is to do some promotion with regards to a restaurant week program. And this promotion, I think especially would, be able to tie in to some of the hotel motel taxes, is because the point of this promotion is to promote it through some other channels other than our usual channels that, directly impact Westmont residents. We'd be looking more at kind of creating a regional draw for the community, becoming known through the region as a restaurant dining destination. So it's something that wouldn't just be towards Westmont residents, but would encourage people to come to our community. So that's there. I don't know if there's any other questions you may have with this. I know one thing that we're going to be exploring is, what's the interaction with the Economic Development Partnership. They're definitely going to be involved with it, and we'll see where that goes, as to whether it's something that we're paying for directly or they're adding it onto their costs, and then we're continuing to pay them as we are, as we pay them split between some general and some hotel motel. So we'll see where that fits with it, but.
Spencer?
Yeah.
You may have later on in here, but one of the things, since we're mentioning hotel tax now, the whole idea of if we wanted to implement any sort of a grant program again with that money through Westmont First, so I don't know if that's in your proposal, but can you add that at some
Yep.
point to discuss during the
Add that
budget?
right now. Sure. Yeah, that'd be a great thing to add in there. Just put it in right now since we're talking about it.
The other conversation that we had last night in regards to Westmont First is for 2014. We should probably establish some kind of budget for Westmont First.
Okay.
We're initial discussion with that and bring something back maybe at the end of January with some ideas on it for the entire year.
Okay.
And I assume that Westmont First probably would have some hotel motel abilities also,
We're
correct?
hoping.
Yeah, I would assume so.
Yep.
Yeah, Nicole. It just
don't
pops
mess
up on your
around.
Wait a
screen.
minute, it didn't change on my paper.
We're checking,
Yeah, too bad.
we're watching for typos, Spence.
Thank
So
you.
far, none.
Well, that's surprising. Ron and Ruth are both very good at catching all of my typos, so they have lots of practice with that. Okay. Any other comments or things we want to make sure we consider as we're looking into either of these?
Isn't it cool?
Okay. So definitely things we will want to look at and probably have, discussion at, maybe at some sort of committee level on both of these, some additional discussion on the grant program and the Westmont First. I think that's something that will take a little bit more discussion than just a brief time during a budget. So we may want to look at that with the grant program to some extent. The next item on here is a planning intern position. So this would be somebody that'd be able to provide some additional assistance during the summertime for some administrative type of help in the community development department. Obviously, when we present this level of the budget, we'd give, some more detailed discussion about specifically what they'd be doing.
Do you provide any sort of reimbursement for an intern?
For what?
Reimbursement, do we give them any stipend?
Yeah, so that would be, the proposal would be to do a stipend. Yeah, I believe that in talking with our community development director, kind of the recommendation would be to provide a stipend and to pay some amount
Okay.
for that, yep. Yeah, as opposed to, yeah, doing it for free, because, you know, sometimes you get what you pay for. And then, so any other questions on that term position? Okay, the next item that's listed here is a part-time administrative assistant. Either one or multiple, whatever is required, but, you know, some additional part-time employee to provide some assistance at the counter during the peak times of the day to try to increase our customer service a little bit more with our one-stop shop. One of the questions that we have that we're gonna be looking at is, you know, to see if we can try to address this a little bit on our own with scheduling, to see if we can address the customer service issues, you know, with our current staff, or, you know, if we need to hire staff. We wanted to bring it to the board's attention that this would be, you know, potentially an idea to try to increase customer service. And I believe this was something the mayor had mentioned and suggested previously as well.
But also be able to assist to help covering during lunch hours. You really
Right,
take,
yep.
take someone, you know, 15, 20 hours a week and let them
Right.
work 10 to 2 or
Right.
something like that.
Something like that.
Just a question, and Steve May probably knows, and Shannon, I'm wondering, since we combined, you know, street and water, and now everybody's over kind of an EDC, if we've enjoyed any economies of scale, and, you know, do we have any bandwidth there where some of those people could take on a different position for an hour or two a day? And I'm even thinking, jumping ahead to the next one with the planning and zoning minutes, you know, you don't necessarily have to be at the meeting to write the minutes. You just need to watch the video. And if there's time during the day where somebody else could be doing that, you know, it might be the old work smarter, not harder
Right.
kind of thing.
And, you know, just to generalize, as part of the reorganization, the 4 administrative assistants are all doing a lot of overlapping work now. So that is still a work in progress, and I'm not even saying that we've concluded that this is necessary. We're just letting you know that this is what we're investigating now to overcome some of the issues we're experiencing now, but if it can be solved differently, we certainly would.
Cool.
Okay, any other comments on that, administrative assistant? Okay. Moving on to the next item, planning and zoning secretary, and this is, I've entered that question you asked just now, Sue, you know, can we do this with some of our current staff? So I've got that question entered in currently.
It's a good idea, they don't have to.
Should be,
Don't
yeah,
have to be here, don't have to pay overtime if they can do it during the day watching the
I would think
video.
that'd be a hard position to fill. I mean, would you just pay somebody extra just to come in and,
Couple hours.
you know, I like Sue's idea of just, you know, it's documented, it's on video, it's,
It's once a month.
Unless you find a retired person that wants to make $100 a meeting.
or
to come in
volunteer and do it,
the
you know,
minutes and
it's-
also then provide them back. I mean, there's I mean, you could look at a bunch of different options.
yeah.
so the mayor said you can do with contracting with somebody.
Everything's
Or-
gonna come down to dollars and the
volunteer.
time of the
Yeah.
staff and stuff, so I mean, I'm just throwing another idea out.
Yep, okay. So, contractor. So the contractor or with the volunteers was mentioned, okay?
Volunteer sounds really good.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Just like those drinking fountains, I like that. Don't even-
Good luck with that.
Same person, yeah, good point, yeah.
And then these next 2 items are similar to what we discussed before with expense decreases, that these are not necessarily things we're recommending, and in fact, you know, are kind of counter to what some of the proposals are. But they're items that, you know, if we're interested in making some increases somewhere else, we may need to look at some decreases. Here are some things that we could consider, because they're either things that we considered previously or return to, you know, where we were previously. So one of the things is elimination of the ICSC event. Again, that goes kind of directly opposite to what we just talked about, which is we want to try to, you know, if we have some additional money, we'd like to dedicate some of that to increasing attendance at the ICSC event. On the flip side, if we're trying to cut money, we do have the ability to reduce that. It's not significant amounts, but it is a possible reduction.
Well, I don't like either of these. I mean, we need more
Yeah.
code enforcement, and we just talked, you know, we need more people to go to this event. So personally, I think both of these should be off the table.
So just completely remove them and don't
I
even bring them
I
up for
do
discussion.
think I do think for like ICSC, I mean, we've been doing that for a long time. And it's good, we hear it's good, but we've never really quantified what we've walked away with or how attending that has benefited us. I mean, what do we do differently that we didn't do before because now we go to this?
Yeah, what do we do
So I
when we
think
go?
some of these expenses, maybe we just need to quantify them a little more.
We
You
have
know?
not participated,
Isn't that the shopping center one?
right,
Yeah.
we have not participated at the national level except, I think, one time.
One time.
That's supposed to be the best opportunity for making contacts. The one that we have done a number of years is the Chicago.
The Chicago one.
That's been, and I can say from my own personal experience from being down there during the downturn in the economy, I'm not sure it was always worth the time because there weren't that many developers and builders that are attending. Now, you know, we're hearing that with the economy improving, those people are starting to come back.
So it probably has more value now to
But we've
continue it.
always have heard that the national event, the one out in Las Vegas, is probably the most beneficial one, and that's one where we could partner with Choose DuPage because they go out there and they have a booth. And I think if we had to choose between the two, probably sending somebody there, even though it's more expensive, would be more worthwhile
Than the Chicago one.
what I've heard.
I think Lamont after attending, really did their kickoff for their TIF area and so forth. So, again, you know, that's one community. I know that that's not the tell-all, but I know that that's where their generation started, so. But I'm with Steve. I think the code enforcement is going the right way now. I don't think there's any room for any reduction there. I mean, if
I'd
anything,
like
we need to go the other way.
I'd
you
just
know.
like to comment on that. We had a meeting the other day and Bob was able to be there. Those folks are actually making some great progress, and I would ask Ron, maybe if you could get that information that was given to us at the meeting and forward that to everybody so that they could see the progress that they've made. You know, pie charts and graphs and
Sure.
everything is in place with the lawn service for next year. The seasonal people want to come back, and they're currently interviewing for that full-time position. But ahead of the game so that they'd be ready for March. So they're doing, from what from what I could tell, I don't want to speak for Bob, they're doing great. They're doing a great job, and they're actually making positive strides on
It
things.
was nice to hear.
Yes.
It really was.
So is that the consensus of the board then, that we want to remove this from consideration, not even address it or mention it when we get to April?
I see a bunch of yes.
Okay.
shake.
I'm
I think
fine
there's a
with
lot more
that.
room for reduction before the code enforcement officers, you
Absolutely.
know what I mean, so.
Okay. All right, moving on to clerks. First item that's listed here is the addition of some additional part-time staff to try to help out. There's been a lot of workload generated by increase in FOIA law changes, and we're anticipating there'll be some additional questions, especially if we implement the stormwater utility, at least in the early stages of it. Clerks will be fielding a lot of those questions about the new item on their bill and how it works and those kind of things. And so, you know, I think it's, you know, beneficial for them to have, you know, part-time person kind of on a more permanent basis for the typical workload of the FOIA issues, those kind of things that they're dealing with on a regular basis. But I think those hours would definitely be increased during the transition for the utility, if that's something that we, you know, are considering.
Can that be worked into that other one we just talked about, the kind of the front desk kind of coverage? If you add a part-time person, can it be a dual? They need to be in the clerk's office.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a great thing to consider.
And we don't know yet if we're going to be able to do a fee. You know, John implied
Yep.
that it wasn't gonna be something we could do.
Right.
So that may not even develop into a
Yes,
problem.
absolutely. Yep.
And it kind of sounds like it won't from what he said.
Well, there's
And you know, to piggyback what the mayor's saying there is that to hire somebody, I know a union a lot of times will call it like a floater, where that person can fill in and answer phones up here or down there or wherever is needed by the day. And
Yep.
maybe that is what we need to look at a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah, and we do have, one of those where Alicia works in both the finance department and then helps cover some of the peak hours for clerks. And so we do have that, and we can certainly look at something similar to that with community development, like you said, as a floater. Yep. Okay. The next item that's listed here is to consider an improvement in security. As you're aware, with the clerk's entrance door, there's that glass panel, and so the suggestion here would be to install a metal grid on the back of that door to be able to prevent people from breaking in as easily. So just a little bit of added security for the clerk's department.
When they're not there.
Even when they're there.
Yes.
When they're there,
But what about the window? I mean, they've got this big window.
Are you talking about the doors or the little
Yeah,
glass
are we
thing?
talking the door or the window?
Glass door, because somebody could crash right through that. Gary, you can address this.
I'll address this. This is,
But they could
actually,
come
it's
to
been
the
our,
window.
it's actually been in our mind since the presentation about the active shooter. And one of the considerations, and maybe this was selfishly thinking on my part, to just name the clerk's office, it actually would apply to actually all departments. Every department in the village hall has a glass door as an entranceway to the, into the department. Not many exit routes. Some people may be trapped in an active shooter situation. And as Sergeant Schlichter said, every second counts. And if we could slow down the penetration of an active shooter into a department with perhaps a metal grid on the interior portion of the door, sure, a gunshot could break the glass, but it certainly will not shatter a metal grid. And I'm talking like some sort of lattice work, something that's not very expensive, that can actually be screwed or bolted to the wood frame of the door. It'll prevent the person from entering at least and delaying
I
his
have a
movement through the
bigger
building.
concern that somebody could come flying through that window.
Yeah,
You
your
see it on
clerk
TV
window.
all the time.
Well,
I mean, that you see it on television all the time. People come through the window.
that's true, that's,
I mean, that's, to me, and
it
They'd have
is
to break it
another
because they
access
can't
point.
slide under it.
But one thing maybe we'd look
they-
at,
but I
again,
mean, it would be
you know,
easy
Carrie,
to do.
instead of
Easy
just
to
the
do.
clerk's office, maybe we really look at the front entrance. If we're really looking at improving the security, maybe we improve the security for the whole building.
That would be very well taken by,
The front door is just a.
Metal
state
detector,
duct, yeah.
whatever the case would be.
well, that and also concern too is the concealed carry law that's
I
come
don't
into
think you
effect.
could bring one in a public place anyways. by
You
the-
can't, but
You can't, but
I'm
people
already
will.
anticipating
Yeah, they
something
will.
is
because
going
we
to
don't
happen.
check.
People will, yeah.
Yeah, they'll just
Nobody's
forget
there to
about it.
No,
check
until
it.
it's too late.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's why I say I look at the front door more so than going department by department here and
Yeah.
I think there's a need, but
Maybe we want
maybe the
recommendations
police
on that,
department
or-
would probably be the best to answer what to do and how to do it, because.
Yeah, I think it's certainly something to discuss, and we should probably,
Department.
you know,
That's why I just added it there for
should
fuel,
probably
food for
defer
thought.
to the experts.
Yeah,
Say it,
You
you
know.
gotta talk about that, but you do.
thank you.
Yeah, definitely something we need to.
It's crazy.
Okay. And then this, sorry, is there anything else with that? Okay. The next item that's here is again, something that was originally listed as an option during last year's budget. Wanted to kind of, again, bring it before the board just so they're aware of it. We may be able to have some slight increase if we were to look at eliminating past due mailing reminders. The major benefit would be in staff time, not necessarily in cost. There would be some slight reduction. That's something that, you know, we could consider. Again, it's not a recommendation, it's just sort of to kind of bring it back to the forefront of the board's mind. It's a potential option. Any questions on that? Okay. Moving on to our Human Resources Administration legislation section of the budget. The first item that's listed here is a strategic planning process. This would
Take
be.
a 2-minute water break, bathroom break.
Sure.
He's double dipping.
Yeah, Jim's eating all the food without me.
Should we take a quick recess? 5-minute break. We'll take a 5-minute break since I saw Trustee Addington eating the food out there. We'll take a short 5-minute break.
What did he?
Section is the idea of a strategic planning process. This is something that we did to some extent a couple of years ago. few years ago, I think back in 2006 or so, where we kind of did this. This would be where we'd have somebody come in to kind of help us identify some goals and sort of direction for the village, some goals, priorities, and then ideally, we then use the strategic plan as part of the budget process. That would kind of give us the initial input from the board to be able to say what direction or do we want to go and those sort of things. If the board has any questions they're going to want addressed in April, should we discuss that? No? Okay. The next item on the list is a benefit specialist in the human resources department. So somebody that's got experience with things like the health, dental, 457, those kind of things. So this would be another part-time employee. So I don't know if there's any specific questions with that one. Okay. The third item would be a compensation study for village-wide compensation study. This would be, we've done this before. We haven't done the one since I think 2001. We used to do it on a more regular basis, but this is where we'd hire an independent consultant to come in and review all of the employees' job descriptions, kind of get them in, identify which positions they are consistent with in the market, be able to determine where their salary ranges are and where they should be, where their actual salaries are and where they should be, kind of give us some ideas about that for a on a village-wide basis. Now, we've certainly done some of this on our own. We've looked at other surveys that other communities have done. We've been doing this on our own, but we haven't had an independent consultant come in and take care of this since 2001. So this is something that it's been proposed previously in the budget, and we just haven't had the funds to do it.
Is a rough idea for those who haven't been here, dollar-wise, something like that? 20, 30,000 less? Roughly? Probably, just
Yeah.
curious,
Yep.
okay.
Rough estimate.
It seemed like, Kathy, that maybe that you were in favor of just comparing to other villages, that worked out pretty well, or?
No, I think that what I was trying to explain when I sent you the background information is that we do get information ongoing from other communities because we participate in surveys ongoing. So we do have the ability to know that information on a regular basis. And we do requests, we do job analysis, and we do that salary surveys analysis as requested on an ongoing basis. Whenever we are filling a vacancy, or if a department head comes in and asks because they feel that maybe somebody is being paid below market, or internally there might be an inequity. So I'm not necessarily opposed to doing
Okay.
a full, but I just wanted to say that, that we do have the ability to be able to see how we're doing with other communities on an ongoing basis.
Okay, thank you.
Part of the value, since it's been so long since we've done one of these, is typically the comprehensive. Every year we get requests around budget time to look at specific positions. If you've done a comprehensive study, usually you can say for several years, you're probably in pretty good shape. You don't need to have staff spend that time to do that. So that'll allow Kathy and Patty to spend their time on other things. Because right now they do spend an awful lot of time. There has been some budget years here in the recent lean years where we simply said, no, we're not going to do any research because we just know it's not going to go anywhere. But we get those requests every year.
Okay, good, thank you.
This sort of study, we'd have to set up the parameters of what other communities we'd look at, either budget-wise, population-wise, assessed valuations, so we would determine that, right, comparables on how we wanted to, okay.
Well, and the last time we did it too, didn't it also include a very in-depth look at the different job grades and groupings?
Right.
So it's more than just, looking at the salary. I think because Heidi Voorhees did it for us, didn't she, that group? Didn't we end up adding grades and
Yeah, they
we
look at our-
pretty much revamped it?
They look at our grade system, and they evaluate the job descriptions, and they talk to the employees to actually find out what they're doing. Job descriptions change over time. They don't stay static. So they update those, and then they peg them to
positions that are comparable in other communities in terms of grading out the wage study. What you always find in every community is there are communities that have positions that other communities don't.
Don't have.
So there's like a point, and it's kind of a scientific point system that's used where they determine, okay, they would slot here between a grade 15 and a 17 based on knowledge, based on experience, based on, what other factors are part of that job description. And that's what, a consultant like that does. There's certainly many of them do that.
Yeah, I think there's a benefit to that I think surveying other communities is always good, with other things and even this. But I think the more in-depth, going through a consultant and, doing those employee interviews and really looking at the work day and the tasks.
Yeah, it's not something we would do every year.
I will tell you,
It's
though.
been 2001.
Yeah, that's why I said it's been a long time.
Okay, but I will say that we do periodically review our job descriptions. So as I mentioned to Ron, our job descriptions are fairly up to date, and yeah, we do. And they're very thorough. So if we were to have a compensation study done, as we talked about, we would make sure that whoever we hire to do it would understand that we want our job descriptions to be as thorough as they are now. Because we had noticed that the last time that they were done in 2001, the job descriptions were kind of generic and not, the kind of general. And so we would like to keep some detail in those job
And
descriptions.
especially with us talking about maybe, combining some positions, doing some job sharing, an hour here, an hour there. I mean, that should all be addressed in some way. And,
Any idea what something like
Minutes
this
paper.
costs?
it was like 20,000 or something.
Yeah, we were saying, we're guesstimating between 20 to 30,000 for both the job description review and the comprehensive salary survey.
So the reason, I guess, what's the reason this came up, is just because we haven't done it in so long?
Yes.
So Ron, do you think we need to do it now?
I think it's something that every organization should do periodically. Like I said, it's been well over 10 years. And I think it will alleviate some demand on current staff for at least several years as we go in the budget process, because we'll have a comprehensive study that's done independently.
I do have to say, I haven't been involved, being new to the whole process at the village, I'm very impressed with the detail that you've got as far as your grading of employees. I mean, Kathy and Ron walked me through a couple of it, and it's amazing how they've got grades and how they got the positions laid out. So I think this would just be a way to make sure we're staying not only competitive in the field too, and see where we fall in, so.
Well, I can tell you, when we participated in Hanover Park in New Lenox just this last summer, and in looking at the results of the survey, our grades and our ranges were very much in line with theirs for the various positions. So I think when we have ours done, I think we're going to find that we're in pretty good shape.
So I guess that's what I'm saying, you've done a good, even though it has been 12 years, I think staff has done a very good job staying on top of that.
Well, that's, in my mind, I think maybe the money would be better spent in getting additional part-time help as opposed to the studies, because we have somebody that's on top of it and giving
Well,
them.
studies are not new. Back in the olden days, we did it with paper and pencil. Cook County did a study twice a year where they would send out a massive document. This would go back in the early 80s. And you'd fill this out, turn it in. Some communities would participate, some wouldn't. What we've been participating in for a number of years is a project that Downers Grove started called Public Salary. Again, it has limitations. The limitations are the number of people who participate. Are they comparable to you? And do they keep their data up to date? And that was the same problem we had historically with the Cook County survey, which was a massive survey that the Cook County government undertook and did it for the whole metropolitan area. And that went away, with the advent of computers.
But you don't have any flags saying that we're missing the mark somewhere.
Don't know.
You don't know.
Well, and the potential, the one problem with comparing to like a New Lenox or other, is they could be wrong. So even though we're on the same page with New Lenox supervisor, maybe this firm would come in and say, New Lenox, you know, firemen are underpaid and so are Westmont's. But even though they're compatible, would that group come in and say that maybe both those communities are underpaid?
Part of the value is they do a
oh, sorry.
work with a broad range of clients, and they may look at what we think should be comparables and give us some advice and suggestions on using different comparables.
Well, they hired an outside consultant to do their
I see.
compensation study. And so it was actually Voorhees that did their compensation study. And so because I participated in it, the consultant sent us, Village of Westmont, a copy of the results. So they're just one firm. I mean, there's plenty of others out there.
So to Bruce's
Private
point,
sector
you know,
does
it's
this
a
all
lot
the
of
time.
money.
Bruce, just, you know, the initial feeling is like, if you're spending $25,000 a year, but if you look at it, you're spending under $2,000 a year for 10 or 12 years, that's what it's cost us to get this information. Maybe it's not bad to update it at this point. What do you think, Kathy? Putting her on the spot, so I get.
No, don't put me on the spot.
You think you're doing a good,
I
huh?
think
Well, and
I think that it's up to the.
And it depends on what you
Good
get.
answer.
And I think it
Threw the
sends
ball
a
right
message
back.
to the public. You know, it sends a message to the public that, you know, we've got our finger on the pulse of it. We're, you know, I think it's a good exercise to go through. But to Bob's point, I guess this isn't the kind of thing that we want to talk about now. We'll
No.
Wait
chat
and
about
see
this later.
You
but
have time to
There's money there
decide.
for it.
Yeah.
If it means
Yeah, we'll
giving
have a
up
lot of
something
time to
for it, you're right.
discuss the nuts and bolts of
It
it.
comes in and we think.
Thank you, Kathy. for
All
all
these
that.
things are gonna come down to dollars versus
We may
something
say no.
else that's more important.
Or if it's-
See what it is first.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we can discuss this in more depth at a committee level. I mean, this would be something that'd be a good idea to get a good handle on kind of as early in the budget process as we can, because if we don't do a village-wide compensation study, we'll probably want to have human resource staff focus on a few specific individuals to double-check them. As Ron mentioned, we typically do, and so the earlier we can decide whether or not we're going to be getting that study will probably be the better, so maybe we can try to address that at a committee
Because really with the union
discussion.
coming in and the street department, that's out of our hands anyways. Right? I mean, that's, you know, that one won't be
gonna
be
negotiate,
reviewed,
yeah.
right?
Well, that was one of the things that I thought would be valuable to us.
In the
Because I'm
negotiation.
sure that's gonna be a question, is how our pay compares to other communities. So it'd be good to have an independent entity take a look at that for us. I think it'd be to our advantage.
Could be a benefit.
The next item is postage meter replacement. We have one that's kind of aging, and actually, we're not quite sure it'll actually be a cost increase. We think it may actually be a cost decrease because of the higher maintenance contract we're paying right now on the older equipment. We think we can actually get newer equipment for at least the same price. So this will probably go away by the time we get to March anyway. The next item is something else that we've addressed initially at some committee, and we'll probably need some additional discussion at committee level. But I wanted to kind of bring it before the board so we can, you know, make sure it's included in the budget process, the discussion for the
This will
trustee
be
expense
on-
allowance.
This will be an item on our January meeting, so.
January 9th.
At the A&F, I mean, administration.
Finance and administration,
Finance,
yeah.
and the 9th, right?
Yeah.
At 5:30, is it? 5:30. Okay.
This next item is looking at someone, and I think the same sort of comments that were made with regards to the planning and zoning minutes would apply here, that we could either look at having somebody on staff, you know, see what we can do with existing staff, look at potentially contracting out with somebody, or look at volunteers to take some minutes at commissions and ad hoc committee meetings. So I don't know if there's any other questions for this specifically as opposed to planning and zoning.
It seems to me we had someone many years ago who did this for our planning and zoning boards. And I don't know if we even compensated that person.
I think they got paid so much a
Or they
meeting.
got paid us.
Yeah, we
I
did.
think she did it gratis,
But
didn't
maybe it was
she?
gratis.
I thought it was gratis.
I think she just volunteered.
Yeah, maybe
I
we'll find.
think Jenny does a really good job. I've never seen anybody write as much as you do.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other?
No,
questions
I
on
think,
that?
you know, let's see what, if
Same
someone
kind
out
of
there would,
things.
I think it's a good idea to do that.
Okay. The next item is a reduction in expenses. Last year, we were able to do some archiving in this administration department, kind of archive some of our old personnel records. And so a potential reduction would be to look to try to archive it every other year instead of just every year, to try to save some additional money.
Is this electronically or sending them to Iron Mountain?
Sending them to what?
Is it electronic archiving or is it physically, like sending them to Iron Mountain?
Yeah,
Not
it's
something-
electronic archiving.
There's no Iron Mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's still Iron
It's a
Mountain.
company.
Well, you know what I mean. That's
not a
the
real
name.
Iron Mountain.
It's a place where you archive your stuff.
Yeah, this would be digital archiving.
Okay,
I think it's a
digital.
magnesium.
We'll see what it saves and then, you know.
Random amount.
And, sorry, what was the comment on that one?
I don't think you want to.
Well, I think it's a comment for them all, is what does it
Where that
save?
place is at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What does it save? Yes.
yeah.
Is it
Where's
really
that place
iron
at?
or is it?
What?
Where's the, we don't know, some of us, the new
the
board members,
cloud.
don't know where that Iron Mountain place is at, where we send our archives.
There's one you
Said-
can see right off of 355.
They just, oh, okay. We've been sending some of our records to?
No.
No?
There's a
Beautiful
company
place,
called
yeah.
Iron Mountain.
Oh,
that
okay.
does-
Where you
I really
store
thought
it.
Sue
Yeah.
had a, all right.
So I was just saying, there's no, I don't think there's an actual Iron Mountain somewhere there.
Oh, it's a company that, okay, does it for you, okay.
Sorry.
So again, you know, yeah, the cost is, of course, the big issue will be addressed, and that's the main question. Okay.
Well, and then is there any danger in not archiving stuff?
Okay.
I would want to know that. Is there a risk with not doing that on a regular basis?
Good question.
The risk, I mean, it takes up storage. You know, we have to follow the Illinois Records Act, Retention Act in terms of what we keep. And, you know, if it's electronic, I suppose it's easier to make copies and store off-site.
Do we annually put a request in to destroy documents, or we do that every couple of years?
We do it annually.
Do it annually? And then they come and sign off on it, and then you
Yeah, we
could,
receive confirmation from the state of Illinois archivist that allows us to destroy the documents, and we've actually, under their recommendation, utilized a vendor, a company out of Smurfit Stone in Aurora, that actually
come, yeah.
pulverizes this, turns it to pulp and recycles it, and then gives us a document of certification that they destroyed it. So we keep that on record, the certification of this destruction.
And that instruction is at no cost.
Can I just ask a question on that? Is there a reason we don't use like the Citadel here in town for that?
There's a charge to it.
There's a charge versus
This
no
is
charge?
no charge to us.
Okay, that answers that.
It's a good reason. It's like that drinking fountain, Harold.
There you
What's
go,
that?
yeah.
It's just like that drinking
Like the
fountain.
drinking
No charge.
Always goes back to the fountain.
So again, these next two items are again things that have just been brought up previously as potential things to be reduced, not necessarily anything we're recommending, especially not at this point. But we could potentially reduce our contribution to DuPage Senior Citizens Council, and we could look at eliminating membership in some of these organizations, which, I mean, the main purpose of DuPage Mayors and Managers and Illinois Municipal League is to provide us with access to additional information to be able to know how other communities handle various issues. And I mean, I think it provides valuable insight, but it is something that we had identified as potential cut last year, as, you know, if we were facing catastrophic cuts. Any questions on either of those?
I think just for us new ones, you'll show dollar amount
Yeah.
that'll be the
Yep.
big thing, yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, how much it means.
Yep.
Is it based on your assessed valuation?
No, it's based on population.
Population? Okay.
There's actually two charges with mayors and managers. There's a population charge, and then there's a, and Jim may remember this, but when they built the building in Oak Brook, there was a debt instrument that was issued, and we're still paying off our portion of that debt.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's two charges that we pay for that.
I think Oak Brook owns the property,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
yeah.
If maybe they're buying.
And they've allowed us to use it, and then there's a fee, because we did a lot of remodeling and fixing up at one time to really, and that's been a great location for mayors and managers, so.
Westmont Center'd be a good location.
Yeah.
too.
Would be, I don't think I'm.
That's, yeah, we have space in the
Yeah,
downstairs.
it would be nice to offer that to someone like that.
You know, they would
though.
love that because their staff loves Uncle Bub's.
Well, you know what? We should ask, oh God, I just went brain dead on you, the young man who's the director. I'm not sure how much square footage they use or have to have.
You know, they have a couple of organizations in there too. IMET's in there and, what's the other one, Spencer? Remember?
Those are the ones that I know of, the
A
IMAX.
couple of other associations. I don't know what the square footage is.
Yeah,
Center all help paying.
I give them the whole, we can give them the whole basement,
Yeah.
you know. There would be a nice.
Parking would, again, be a challenge.
There
They have
you
more
go, yeah,
parking
that
where they're
might
at
be.
now.
Because when they have their meetings, then it's.
Meetings, and they have quite a few people
Yeah.
that show up sometimes for those meetings.
It would at least be something to explore, wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, we can certainly ask.
I have something that was eliminated, and I'm not sure where it fits. I don't know if it fits in here or in the next one, it says village-wide. But, you know, I know because of budget considerations and everything else, the taxi coupons were eliminated a couple of years ago. And is that something that we want to reapproach? This has been brought up to me, that's why I'm asking it here.
Certainly add it to the,
We had a taxi discount program for seniors.
There was an expense.
Taxi discount program.
It's
Yeah.
been going 5 years.
It's been gone quite a while.
Oh, it's been gone a long time.
Do other villages do it?
What did we subsidize? We were subsidizing
Yes.
Yeah.
to the taxi company if they,
Yeah.
here comes Kerry, he's gonna tell us.
Well, and then there was a lot of administrative time with that, wasn't there?
Yes.
It's been eliminated for approximately 4 years, and because of budget reductions. There was a subsidized program where 50% of the coupons.
But there was also a lot of work within your department to handle
It,
it.
it was comparable, if I had to draw a parallel, it'd be comparable to selling yard waste stickers and garbage stickers, something like that. The resident would come to us, purchase the coupons.
Take a taxi
And then the
over.
taxi company would redeem the coupons. So it was kind of outgo the coupons, they come back in as a redemption item from the cab company.
How
It's a
many,
little bit of work, but not terrible.
how many cab
Kerry, do you
companies do we have
remember what the
licensed?
cost-
I'm sorry.
8 are licensed.
There are 8 are
Cost
licensed?
was to us?
I'm sorry.
Do you remember what the cost was to us on an
Annually?
annual basis?
The cost of printing them, I do not recall.
I think we should put it back in and talk about it.
You don't think the cab companies, we can negotiate with them, that if those that gave the rate, special rate, we would promote them by selling coupons for, and we wouldn't reimburse them? Couldn't they give the seniors a discount? If cab A company offered it and we sold it here, but we wouldn't reimburse it at all?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Mayor, but one of the things that we encountered was that some of the cab companies would not honor them.
Okay.
They preferred to take fares that did not involve the cab coupons at all. Yeah, there were only a couple of cab companies in
Like Cash?
particular.
Cash is king.
Cash is
Yeah,
king.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
I understand that, but I'm just, again, it was brought up to me a couple times, including this afternoon, so I just thought I'd say, is it something we want
We should-
to at least throw out
We
to
should put it back
discuss?
in, or at least
Absolutely.
put it in for discussion.
Discussion.
it has been added for discussion.
I was at a house in Westmont yesterday where I happened to notice that there must be two
Somebody
neighbors
let you
next
in?
door, that both the seniors were getting a taxi at the same time, so they must have been carpooling a taxi from the neighborhood, so I know a lot of our seniors are dependent on it, so.
And they liked it.
Yeah, they seemed like wasn't their first time, I'll tell you that.
If I go back when we only had one.
Okay, the next item under village-wide, so village-wide personnel type of things is some team building training to try to increase the quality of work life and provide training in that area. Any questions on that one? Other, of course, than the cost. Okay. Next one is considering, and this is something that's been brought up before, but looking at considering paid time off for part-time employees to provide some sort of additional benefit to part-time employees, especially if we're looking at getting additional part-time employees. Are there any questions that you guys may have with
I
regards to
just
that.
have never have heard of that, of
never
a
heard of
part-time
that.
Oh my
employee
gosh.
having,
Oh, yeah.
having paid.
Private sector all the time, Home Depot,
Really?
Bob's part-time, he gets sick
He gets
time,
it at Home Depot?
vacation
You're
pay,
considered-
sick
Holy
time.
cow.
If you're considered
Gotta
a
get a job
permanent
there.
part-time position, then when you're permanent part-time means that, okay, you're just not working the full, maybe it's a 25-hour a week or something like that. But
Less than
there
30.
is compensation packages
29.
for those folks who fit into that as opposed to a seasonal part-time.
We
And,
have,
and I know that some places we're giving some time off, we're giving some other compensations, a couple of sick days a year, you know, it wasn't as much as the full-timer, you know, but maybe you got a couple of days, you got a couple of, I think even at the bank, if I remember correctly, there was a,
I can give you
I
an
want to say
example.
3 or 4 days, yeah.
I'll give you.
Have you got them?
Yeah, because we rely a lot on part-time
Yeah.
people to fill key jobs, we provided individuals work over, like 1,000 hours a year, so many weeks a year. We give them the six major holidays based on their average hours worked. And then they get a week's 5 days vacation, up to 5 years, and they get 10 days vacation. But it's all based on their hours of work. So they get a 4-day vacation. And we give it to them after a year of working. It
And then
just,
they make
it makes them feel
It's very
like they're,
common.
it gives them some benefits for being part of the organization. And I've got like 6 or 8 of them that have been with us
I just didn't like
10
the
years.
idea of
Yeah.
working
Yeah.
one
The
And
day.
they
holidays,
feel
I-
like
it's-
and
it's a
it's
nice
a,
thing.
it's a small,
Yes.
really
After a
small
year, or-
benefit.
Again, we'll see that
price to
number.
pay. All right.
You're not,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
not retraining.
See what it
No, that's
costs,
it.
right?
We're
No,
keeping
that's
them.
right.
They're mostly
That's it.
local.
You take 10 people to replace the good one you had.
They don't need
you
the
know.
health insurance. It's nice to feel
we
like
need
they
to
can
see
take a
what
day
it
off and
costs.
get 4 or 5
Yeah.
hours
Yeah,
of pay.
that's what
Right.
you're doing, yeah.
Yeah,
I like
and the budget cost would be minimal because with the budget, we say, how many hours does this employee work? They work 20 hours a week.
Right.
Multiply by the weeks, this is how much we'd expect them to work if they work their full schedule.
Right.
And so if we're saying, instead of, on the day you would be scheduled to work, instead of working the 20 hours, you'd get paid for it, it's no additional cost to the village because we already factored that in. So right now, if somebody, is scheduled to work on a holiday, they work a different day instead.
I see.
So it'd be a little bit of potential loss in productivity, potentially made up for increased productivity due to morale. or
Morale.
Some other time
Yeah,
off.
it does.
Just scratch my nose
They
off.
feel like they're part of the organization.
And Spencer, just to
Yes.
wrap this up on this
Yep.
topic, you'll be, forecasting some numbers of what something like that might
Yeah.
cost us.
Yep.
And in March, we can have a look at that, and that's when we can have the
Yep.
discussion and talk about it.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing for a lot of these.
Yeah.
Yes.
The next 4.
I think it's a
same
good idea.
thing.
Yeah, yep,
I mean-
yeah, general wage adjustment, yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Cool.
we'll want to look at what other communities are doing, that's what we generally look at. Health insurance options, sorry, what?
Nothing. I'm just,
I think Steve's hurrying you up.
Ron's being, Ron's
Sorry,
being.
that's fine,
yeah.
we're going quicker. Okay, health insurance options.
It's like poor,
No game
poor trustee
tonight.
Scott made the comment that
this
we
one
can move
around
quickly on
already.
some of these things. And
Yeah.
we're just talking about everything.
I know how you're.
We're getting our budget
Okay,
done.
so health insurance options, I did want to point out that this was something that was specifically mentioned last year in the budget, that budget discussion, that we may want to look at some other options. Specifically, one item that was mentioned was moving people that are currently on PPO, which is a little bit more expensive plan, forcing everybody to be on to HMO or pay the cost difference. So that's something we want to look into. We also want to look at other alternatives, to see if there's other cost-saving things that we could do that could generate similar amounts of savings. So we have an insurance committee that's looking into those different options. Any questions on that we can not
Yes.
discuss tonight but answer in April?
Is there a non-insured person on the committee? Someone who's not in the insurance, getting the insurance who's on the
Yes.
committee? Okay.
Yep.
That's always helpful because, when you have a committee that's all getting the benefits from it, you don't have somebody else looking at it, so.
I think most people think that when everything's said and done with the Affordable Care Act, everyone's gonna be on HMO. The
Yeah.
United States is gonna be an HMO, basically. That your PPOs are somewhat eliminated at this point.
Yeah.
At least that's what they told me.
Furlough time, again, it's not something we're recommending, just the same topic we talked about before.
Right.
We wanted to look at previous cuts that we've made. This is something we may need to consider if we're looking at significant cuts. Any questions on that? Okay. I'll go through finance. It's very brief and very quick. One of the items that we cut in the budget the last couple of years has been getting updated editions of the payroll source, which is kind of one of our guides and our handbooks, we rely on other people to give us theirs when they're done with them. So we're always a year or two behind. We'd like to be current. That's the extent of it. Any questions you're going to have in April? Okay.
Sounds like you work at the Park District.
Yeah, we'd like to get a current one occasionally.
You want to be an early adopter.
I get everything.
Or at least an on-time adopter. That would be good. All right, the next item is continuing education. This is also something that has been cut from our budget. You know, it's one of the few expenses we've had to be able to cut as we were making budget cuts. And so we've kind of reduced that. We've got a couple of employees that are paying their professional organization dues themselves. We'd like to, assuming we have money, you know, be able to provide those for those employees. And I'd like to have one additional employee be able to attend the IGFOA conference. So currently we have the finance director go. I think it would be wise to have the senior accountant go as well. Any questions on that one? Okay. Electronic archiving. This is another thing that's been cut out, you know, postponed due to financial considerations. We typically scan in our accounts payable invoices as well as our payroll timesheets. We're about 6 years behind on it. Because we adopted our electronic timesheets, don't have as many years of those to scan. So we would be interested in starting to scan those to get them electronically archived as opposed to staying in the back room. It's not essential. It would be nice. Other options that are up for potential reductions are things we've discussed, again, previous budgets. Potentially, we could look at eliminating the award for the CAFR in the budget. Not large dollar amounts, but there's some of the few items that we have discretionary spending that we could eliminate the paying the GFOA to give us those awards. We'd still, of course, do the budget process. We'd still do the comprehensive annual financial report, but we could look at not necessarily getting those awards. Any questions on those that you will have in April? Okay, moving on to information technology. Again, there's a request for a part-time employee. This is something that was also cut from the budget several years ago. Some of the board members may remember when we had George Mance that worked as a contract employee that did a lot of the video recording of meetings and then also helped out with some general desktop maintenance sort of things in IT. And that was cut previously, and so we'd be interested in either going with part-time or a contract employee to try to replace some of that, to try to improve some of our internal services for information technology. Any questions on that one? I mean, the one question we identified is what's the cost difference on that one. IT training, there's some additional training that, you know, we'd like to be able to start doing some of these additional trainings. And specifically, you know, we're looking at, with our new virtualization system that we're implementing and our network servers, you know, and some of our, you know, security in general, we'd like to try to improve some of that and make sure we're staying up with the current topics that are coming on. So we'd be looking for a little bit additional increase in training. As with finance, those are the things that get cut when you're looking at budget cuts. Any questions on that?
I just want to, let's ask one question so Fred can get up there and answer
Excellent.
something, because
Yeah.
Fred's here representing Glenn, and I see 11 adds and only 1 subtraction, so we're going to ask you a question. Right, 11 increases, only 1 blue.
Yeah.
Ask Fred a question.
Well, we're going to ask you a question here in a minute. We'll wait, just
So
stand up there.
the major answer to that, as to why there's so many ads for this one, is that the first
Not a thin
4
client.
ads are ads that are from IT department itself. The remaining of the 11 are items that other departments have indicated they would be interested in getting that deal with technology. They all go into IT's budget, so they're all listed here, but these are, only the first 4 are specific IT department related things.
Could you rank them for us, Fred?
Which one is more important?
Through 11.
Thanks, Fred.
Higher priority things are things that he doesn't have to deal with.
All right.
So, number 3 is some computer replacements, as well as replacing some things with thin clients. This is something that we did for a while. We were able to postpone it for a little bit as we had some computers that were able to last a little bit longer, and they're getting closer to the end of their useful life, and it's about time to start looking at replacing them. Obviously, we'd only replace the ones that need it and that have the issues, but it would be good to have some more money available because those are coming more and more frequently. Questions on that one? Yes.
Yeah, and maybe Fred, it would be better for him to answer, but as you make these replacements, do we replace with a hard computer, or are we going with those consoles where you can plug in a laptop.
Fred, get up and explain what a thin client is.
I was gonna say a thin client.
That's what I wanted.
It's an excellent question.
Yeah, because I knew that didn't apply to me automatically, so.
In some areas, workstation is a more appropriate answer if it's a more powerful use case. Whereas a thin client is also a good space. We've been able to repurpose a lot of our old hardware to extend its life from 5 years to 10 years as we go through a server refresh cycle.
What does
So
that mean?
that's where we can
A thin client is
leverage
essentially
those.
like going back to a terminal off of a network.
Yeah, so it's the 70s repeating itself, only we have color this time.
So Fred, is it sort of like,
More power, a lot more power.
so is it sort of like one server, is it like, I can't think of the word.
Cutting back on the number of hard,
So it's like one,
servers we have to
one
maintain.
server serves a lot of people, sort of like almost like a dummy box that.
Yeah, it's like a
it-
bus
and it
made
can
by
only do certain
Lamborghini.
functions and,
So it's like a Lamborghini bus. Everyone can fit in there, and when you
Okay.
want to go fast, you can, but the rest of the time is fast enough for everybody else to get where they're going.
Gotcha.
So.
Great analogy,
You can
thank
go
you.
home now.
Nice job, thank you.
Tom wants to say something about this, oh.
Oh, I thought so.
Okay.
He's gonna Google it.
So the next item there is getting a spare switch for our servers. We have so when our servers go down right now, the backup for our current 10 gig switch is a much smaller switch that can handle much less data. It'll work, it will just barely work. So we'd like to have some additional redundancy. Another item we're looking at as we're looking at this is seeing if we can do it more cost effectively if we simply include it into our response time agreement we have on other pieces of the network. So we can try to get the issue of solving our problem more quickly taken care of without buying the new piece of equipment. So we're looking into that.
I really think of the rest of these IT issues, unless I'm speaking out of school for the board, I mean, I think until we see the numbers,
Yep.
we might as well just move right on through them, right?
Sure.
I mean, the IT, I think it's pretty French to all of us at this point, until we see the
Well,
numbers.
Glenn's not here, we gotta just
And if
forget
it's
it.
a recommendation, they need it, that's where we're gonna,
Okay?
yeah, right. So-
Just send Glenn a memo, tell him we eliminated all this stuff.
Yeah,
You wouldn't-
Glenn,
We just
sorry.
got rid of
Sure. So I'll just, I mean, you can see them, I'll just briefly go through and just say what they are for the other departments. Then we're looking at in-car cameras for police. We're looking at financial software. The board's aware of the discussion during the audit for that. Community development is looking into permit tracking, software packages that could address some of their tracking issues. We'd be looking at a time clock system, which would especially be important for fire, but also would be impacting everybody as our current system is sort of reaching the end of its life. Fire department's looking for Call One software. Police is looking for a live scan system replacement, which is their fingerprint scanner. And then fire and police would be looking for load balancers for the mobile computers. And then the decrease is the fact that this year we don't have the same large cost of server replacements we've had previously. So some of the items we've identified might be able to be covered under the same amount we have spent previously. Questions there? Okay. All right, so we're out of this document then, we're on to the one that's labeled 04_C for capital. And for most of these, I think similarly to what we talked about before, for most of these, I'll just briefly go through them. If you have any questions or anything that you specifically know we're gonna wanna discuss, we can do them, but I wanna just kind of mention so you know what they are, what we're looking at. We're looking at some additional equipment of a stump grinder in the street division, a hydraulic lift for fleet, some portable speed humps. I know that's been discussed at some committee meetings previously. Fleet is also looking for a replacement welder if it's in the budget, and then we'd be looking at some diagnostic scanners to help be able to assess issues with our fleet. Any questions on those fleet-related issues? Capital projects, okay. Infrastructure is next, looking at some of the street things. So we've got Wilmette Avenue reconstruction. We've got some alley reconstruction. We're gonna wanna be looking at it along with green infrastructure. We've got our annual sidewalk project. Some potential improvements to the Westmont Depot, and some of these we'll discuss in more detail when we get onto the bond section. And then the in-pavement crosswalk lighting, the board's well aware of that. It's been discussed at multiple committee meetings, of the issue of the strobe light versus the in-pavement markings, the in-pavement lights. The next item, so any questions there on any of the infrastructure? Okay. We're going quick now. All right. Under facilities, one thing we may need to consider is setting aside some money for some HVAC repairs. We're getting to the point where we're not able to do the small little fixes to it anymore. It's at the point where if a coil goes, it's gonna need to be replaced instead of just.
Do we have a contract on the maintenance of it here, right? Or no?
Yes, we do.
So someone comes, change filters and services, but everything replacement we pay for.
Combination
Yes.
of ourselves and the contract, and this is, for those of you that do know, when there's a problem in this building, it's a pretty significant problem, so this is more proactive work.
Okay.
Similar situation with the HVAC at Westmont Center. And then in looking at the capital improvement request from fire, we've got a request for a rear apron replacement at headquarters. That's something that we, again, as it's applicable looking at the green infrastructure things. We're also gonna see if we can do that in-house versus with the contractor. They're having issues with the door, we're gonna look at addressing, and then the concrete railing is something that I think has been mentioned in this past budget and is kind of being carried forward as an item for consideration in this next one.
And Dave doesn't want to see the roof back on this budget, because it should be done by then, right?
I hope so.
Yeah, he's shaking.
Any questions on any of the fire items? Okay. Police. We're looking for inspection of the roof to make sure it doesn't get to the same issues as we've experienced recently with fire. Yes, because Dave scared him. We'd be looking at speed sentry devices. That's something that I know has been mentioned by the board previously as something that we want to look into, some speed sentry devices, and look at kind of the difference between portable versus permanent devices. And then the range upgrade is something that's been on previous budgets a couple of times in police. We've postponed it due to lack of funding, and just wanted to kind of bring it up to the board's attention again.
I assume that's shooting range?
Yes. Yep. Any questions on those? Okay. Information technology, we're looking at reducing the overall number of copiers in the village so we can see a savings on our copier costs in capital. The last couple things I wanted to talk about are the bonds, and I'm not sure which, I think the 1.5 million is probably next in the packet.
It is.
It is, okay, great. So these are, as the board's aware, we have a couple of different bonds. We've got our 1.5 million, which can be used for a little bit broader type of interpretation. Our 8.5 million can only be used for things that are eligible under motor fuel tax. And so there's been a lot of things that have been listed, discussed at Stormwater Committee, discussed at the board level or at other committees that have kind of been listed as things we may want to consider using the 1.5 million for. So I wanted to kind of just sort of get everything out on the table so we're aware of the different things that have been listed for this. And of course, the next step, is to go with assuming some costs so we can see kind of how much there is. But I wanted to at least mention to the board the items that have been listed here. So we're looking at potentially using it for some contractual storm sewer and jetting, some contractual grading, which is ditching, some GPS storm sewer inventory potentially, the use of land banking to be able to use for stormwater infrastructure, stormwater utility implementation. And we're, if we can even do a utility, I'm not sure about that legally, and then if we can, we'll see the ability to use bonds for that. And then a more recent item that the board, I'm not sure to what extent this has been mentioned to the board, it was recently addressed at the Stormwater Committee meeting, that we're in the process of doing some engineering work for both Cumner and Wilmette. Those were some of the infrastructure projects we're planning to in this year's budget, and has been addressed at a previous meeting where, it's been mentioned by previous board members previously, we want to make sure we're considering green infrastructure along with those things. And so we could potentially use this money to pay the additional cost for the engineer to look at using green infrastructure for these street projects so that we don't have the situation where we do one street project and then need to redo it. Initiative. And then
The bonds, really 3-year cycle to use it. So,
Yes.
I mean, there's not
Yep.
like a rush to use all.
No.
9.5 million next year. I mean, it's a 3-year
Right.
period where you're supposed to be, you need to use the money in 3 years. Or
Yes.
have plans
Yep.
with it, okay.
Yes, and, yeah.
And if those projects are underway, is that considered using the money even if it's not done by those certain dates?
I think we have to pay that out within the 3 years or we run into arbitrage type of issues. But
I don't think you have to worry. I've talked to Steve already.
He's already.
It's already gone.
We're not in a hurry. I'm telling you, in January, you're gonna see a couple.
It's just, it doesn't all have, I guess my point is, it doesn't all have to be in this budget. I mean, it could be over the
Right.
next 3 years, so.
Right, yep. And then the last item is to look at hiring a consultant to perform an analysis on some specific areas to see, you know, whether it's more cost-effective to do some of these green infrastructure items. Any questions on the stormwater or these $1.5 million bonds? Okay, almost done. Then we've got, under the $8.5 million, looking at street resurfacing and potentially some alley resurfacing. So I think those are all the considerations that we had identified initially. Are there other things that we have missed? I know we've kind of added some things in as we've been going through it. Is there any other things that we want to make sure that we include or address in the budget going forward? Anything else that
I
hasn't been
think
covered?
the attorney's opinion on the one item is probably hanging over a lot of our utility.
Yep.
And then on the resurfacing,
Yeah.
on the alley and the street, I'm assuming that Steve you'll identify, just like with roads, you'll identify alleys where you think the top priorities are or?
Yeah, well, yes, and the first step, that wasn't intended to going into that to be an alley program, but there were certain alleys that were identified that are far past, needed repair, and we determined that we can expend motor fuel tax funds on that. So even though it's listed in there on the sheet as a separate item to streets, it's just going to be part of the resurfacing program, and that's for alleys that are already asphalt, so it's a resurfacing. If we
Like
have
a
to
B1.
rebuild alleys, then we go back to that green infrastructure item.
Any other comments? Very thorough. I think we're all anxious to see little dollar figures along with all, because
Yes,
that'll determine what
It goes
gets
without saying.
kept in and taken out.
Jim and I often share notes here during these meetings.
I've
Most
watched
of them are confidential, but I was just sharing with Jim here that Spencer is A+++. I tell you, Spencer, your job here is just absolutely
Harold,
wonderful.
On our side of the table, we had Spencer as A+++++.
I see, okay. But really, a wonderful job, Spencer, thank you.
Thank you, and, we really appreciate
Swell in now.
the board taking their time to come have this additional meeting early on so we can kind of get an idea of
Good.
where, priorities are and, what other sort of things we need to be investigating along the process. So thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
We wouldn't want to be
Thank you very
anywhere
much.
else.
You.
What's that? So we wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Making
Ron?
But what, yes, sir.
And Steve, I'm gonna throw this out to Steve also. As this process goes forward, and we talk about, this green initiative, and I know there were a couple of comments in this presentation that Spencer made about whether or not, there's a cost savings, we can do some of these things. I'm not sure that that's my top priority, although dollars and cents always has to be part of a concern. I just think that what was presented to us as alternatives with some of these streets and doing some of this paving and some of this other stuff, even if it was a little more expensive, I just think it creates so much more positives in the other things, so.
We'll be one of the first to do it, and maybe
Yeah.
a couple dollars more,
Well,
but.
Yeah.
it's a quality of life, too.
That's,
And in the long
thank
run,
you, that was,
it's
I was
gonna-
trying to.
And yet, we
the
don't
future.
know that it's gonna come in more. We still
No,
have
you
yet to
don't.
see
That's right.
those black and white numbers.
Plus the grants that the company can provide us.
And the grants
Lack
that
of
we,
learning.
that's right, yeah.
That's-
Yeah, we don't even know.
I'm encouraged by the grants that are available going this route. So,
Yeah, I am too.
very good meeting. Any other?
Very good meeting.
We know the next steps because Spencer, AAA+++ had it all laid out. I know what the next steps are going to be under agenda item 6. So if there's no other discussion, I'll need to have a motion to go in executive session to discuss personnel and land acquisition.
So move, Scott.
Second, Nero.
Motion's been made and seconded to go in executive session. Roll call, please.
Trustee Scott.
Yes.
Trustee Barry.
Yes.
Trustee Addington.
Yes.
Trustee Seneca?
Yes.
Trustee Nero?
Yes.
Trustee Barker?
Yes.
Okay, this will adjourn the executive session. There will not be any further business after the executive session, so this regular part of the budget workshop special meeting is adjourned.